It does, yeah. For 2 years, so it would be. And see Ames?
Yes, yeah.
Must go away. Yeah, right. It's like the tiger lobby.
I was worried about today, Susan's last name. I was trying tomorrow. Throw it away.
Great. Looking forward to that. That's how it's walked with it.
I'm doing this now. All right.
There's Craig.
Well, you guys are cool.
Welcome, Craig. How are you? How are you? Nice to see you.
I have Susan to say that.
We have a seat for him?
Yes, right there.
How are
The
you?
other thing, you know,
Very good.
the treasury, you got
So much.
my first thought was that, I was looking to see Chris here. It is.
I think yours just.
Looks like mine are on the move here. Thank you. How you were home?
Here about
I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 12:03. Being consistent with our last meeting, we'll call this one to order at 12:03.
That's a good memory.
Well,
Or was it in the minutes?
you know, who's in the minutes, of course. And welcome. It's great to see everybody. And hope, in terms of the weather, I'm really sorry that we couldn't have done this on a rainy day and plan it that way, so that it wasn't a beautiful day, one of those rarities in summer that we had to meet on, but that's great for our guests. So Ames and Mike will believe that Vermont is like this every day of the summer and continue our reputation. So,
As long as it snows when I need it to ski.
Well, it does that too. We never get ice there.
So everyone has a copy of their agenda. And the first item, and I probably should say in advance, that if you look at this agenda, you'll think that we're going to spend the first hour and a half on the follow-up information requests. We're not going to do that. We're going to do a shortened version of that and then come back to it later after we've enjoyed our time with our two consultants who have come to join us. So let's start with the approval of the minutes of the June 11th meeting. Chair would entertain a motion that they be approved.
I'll move that, Jerry.
Thank you, Heidi.
I second.
A comment, Jerry.
Yes.
As I told Elaine, minute taking and recording is an art, and we've all sat on many boards and we've seen horrid minutes, but the minutes of the last meeting I thought were just first rate. Very important discussion, very well memorialized.
Thank you, Church.
Now you can't slip below that.
No, thanks for
I was
that.
thinking we're going to shorten it up.
No pressure.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Church, you make my comments very difficult to make. Because I have an addition that I chatted with Elaine about. In the minutes where we have gone through and articulated things, I'm sorry, that's pages 6 and 7. we articulated things we wanted to see from a more interconnected system. And in addition to those, if you remember from our strategic plan document, where we left off last September, there was a final page that talked about what different stakeholders would want from our new system. And that included faculty and staff, it included students, employers, employees, parents, and it had the things that we had drawn out from our strategic plan, and I would like it added, Elaine, with those so that they're all together. Otherwise, I ditto everything Church said. Other additions, modifications, corrections, anything? Hearing none.
So Jerry, can I assume then that the motion was to approve the minutes, the amendments that you proposed to them?
Yes.
Yeah,
I hope so.
yeah. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you. If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Fine.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So now we will go to the follow-up information requests, and I'm going to turn that over to Jeff.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to have the opportunity, and we're going to try to keep this relatively concise. Some of the information will probably be just in the realm of here it is. If you have any real sort of basic questions, ask. Otherwise, maybe we'll, if, for example, when we list the courses that are, not the courses, but the programs at the various colleges, maybe we can come back to that later, as the chair mentioned. But at least you can see it. If you have any sort of basic questions, we can ask them. I'm wondering, Mr. Chairman, has everybody done introductions so our guests know who's all here, or did they go around, or should we?
We haven't, so that's a great idea. Thank you.
We have a gentleman on the telephone.
Oh, yes. David?
Yes.
You're with us. Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I actually called in about 10 minutes early, so I'm here.
Okay. So, shall we start? I'll start, and we'll go around with Craig, right around. I'm Jerry Diamond, Chair.
Craig Allen, trustee. Michael Thomas with the New England Board of Higher Education.
Heidi Pelletier, trustee.
Dan Smith, Vermont Technical College.
Bill Reedy, General Counsel.
Mike Pichek, trustee.
Yasmin Ziesler, Chief Academic Officer.
Diane Pollack, CIO.
Elaine Sopchak, Assistant Chancellor. Karen Luno, Trustee. Arthur O'Connor, Trustee.
Tom Robbins, CFO. Church Hines, trustee.
Thanks, McGinnis. This organization has such a long title. They call it NCHET in Boulder, Colorado.
I'm Joyce Judy with the Community College of Vermont.
So, listen, Dave, I'm assuming that for your benefit, we're going to have everybody speak with their projection voices going. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, in fact, you're the only one I can hear very clearly.
Okay.
You're
So,
using your radio voice.
just remember that. Mr. Chair, can we just have Tony and the rest of the crew here that are with us sort of introduce themselves so we know who we got?
I'm Tony Peffer, the Chief Academic Officer at Castleton.
Jeff Weld, Director of Marketing and Communications at Castleton.
Scott Eichman, the Dean of Administration at Castleton.
I'm Beth Walsh. I work at Johnson State College, and I'm President of the Vermont State Colleges United Professionals.
Joshua Mormon, Vermont Press Bureau.
Tricia Coates, Director of External and Government Affairs.
Okay, so one of the questions we talked last time about being a cohesive system, and the question came up, well, what have we already accomplished in that regard in various aspects, whether it's operational or academic or IT, and what's on the drawing boards? And Yasmin, I'm going to go in this order because I think that's the order you said you were going in. Yasmin and Tom and Diane, I think was the order we're going in, had put together a little PowerPoint presentation to sort of give us a little background on what we've accomplished over the years. And I would say, when I go and visit different places, which I try to do occasionally, I haven't had a lot of time to do it, but I find that actually, even though we have a long road ahead of us in terms of all the improvements and doing so bad already. And compared to a lot of places, for example, the transferability of our credits among our colleges is better than a lot of other places. But we thought it would be helpful, and there was a request to understand what we've already accomplished. So I am going to ask Yasmin, Diane, and Tom to do this as succinctly as you can. But this will be the sort of the longest part of the follow-up items we have, so it may take us a little bit of time on this.
Yeah, if we can move forward. So we're thinking here first about our academic programs, and when you talk about efficiencies in academics, really what we're talking about is how do we leverage our resources as a system to produce the highest quality. I think we're not really about shaving academic programs and some of it just to think about efficiency. So academic quality, student success, so the system contributions we've accomplished so far. First, around our quality improvement process, that's our Policy 101, now PRECIP. That's a process that's really drawing upon faculty across the system to give each other feedback about our program.
And could I ask just a clarifying question? When you say what we have done so far, when did you? Where did we start from?
When did we start from? That's a great question. We went back, and I think you had this at the previous meeting, past strategic plan. So looking at least back into the early 90s, Elaine, is that about right? So,
okay.
Yeah, thank you. So Policy 101 PRECIP, that process. Our general education, Policy 106, general education and graduation standards equivalency. So in policy, we've established that our general education programs are defined as equivalent across our colleges, and we've put in place graduation standards at all of our colleges. In terms of registration, that is a process students can register for courses across colleges. You might hear a little bit more about that from Diane. The Office of External Programs. So this does go back a little bit before 1994, and other memories here on the board might remember when when that was established. But that is a VSC wide program that provides prior learning assessment for individuals. So documenting how you've learned things and then getting credit for it, credit by exam. And training evaluation services. So those CCV, that program is housed at CCV, but it's really serving any student in the VSC. Next is libraries. So we have 4 libraries across our system. We have the Harkness Library serving CCV and Vermont Tech, and then 3 libraries at each of the other 3 institutions. But together as a library council, they are quite consolidated in how they operate, with databases that are served by IT staff here centrally, subscriptions. They are negotiating those contracts every time and looking at how to optimize the way they share databases for greatest efficiency. And just to give you a framework there for library expenditures, under $350 per FTE here in the VSC. Keene State is spending $448, Plymouth $407, and UVM for $1,000. So I think our library council, library directors would say we are maximally optimized as a system. And then finally, and you've heard about this in the recent past, but our learning technologies development support is really a VSC-wide coalition of faculty and staff that is advancing our use of learning technologies. Any questions before I go on from that? All right. So then on the opportunity side, and I'll say that these are thoughts in progress, thoughts that individual colleges have already been working on. But the first is around our degree pathways. And so thinking about how can we leverage technology that might come centrally from a system, or software to clarify within colleges, and they are doing work to really streamline how they're communicating about a degree program, and then to communicate more clearly the vertical pathways between certificates, 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees. So those are some active conversations happening, and there's more there to do as a system, I think, to strengthen that. The last point I would make about that too is that an additional pathway is a competency-based pathway. So as you're thinking about system opportunities, how are we defining that prior learning and developing pathways into degree programs that start with students' existing prior learning or competency. Another opportunity is to think about our offerings, which I am imagining the board has done periodically, but to look at that range of offerings from a statewide perspective, looking at it aligned with workforce needs and projections, and looking at it from the perspective of a statewide, what do students need in terms of delivery. And I'll just point your attention to a few other resources. The McClure Foundation has developed this Pathways to Promising Careers, where they've identified by degree level associate, bachelor's, master's, kind of the high-paid, high-growth jobs in Vermont. So thinking about alignment of our degrees, and again, I imagine our individual colleges have done some of this thinking already, but thinking about that from a statewide perspective. And then in terms of learning delivery, where we're at right now, CCV, of course, has many, many programs available statewide and online. At the bachelor's degree level, we have a few. So the external degree program offers a few programs that are really accessible online statewide. You've heard recently about Vermont Tech's bachelor's programs, nursing, the manufacturing, engineering, tech, where they have a vision for delivering that in a more statewide way. And Linden State, I know, is exploring an early childhood ed program to be delivered statewide. So those are some steps forward, but that's something to think about as well. And final point would be institutional research data. That's in some ways an easy thing for us to do well to support all of our colleges, is to come up with consistent frameworks and data reporting that they can access to really drill into how are we measuring our student success and things that we want to get better at. How do we assess our curriculum delivery and management? So that's a work in progress.
This goes back to the last screen. I just want clarification. So Vermont State College system-wide, there's opportunity for credit for prior learning?
Yes. So
and how does that work exactly?
Sure. So a student would go to the Office of External Programs, or they might get a referral there from a CCV site, and they would either register for assessment of prior learning course or do a focused portfolio course. And those courses, and President Judy could chime in here, but those courses are offered not just at CCV, but some of the other VSC institutions as well. Yeah. So they would go through that prior learning assessment process, create a portfolio. It's evaluated by a team of VSC faculty, and credit recommendations are then made about the credits that should be awarded.
Yes, the only thing I would say is it's made up of far beyond VSC
That's
faculty.
true, right.
UVM faculty, the faculty from all of the state Norwich. Faculty are often members of accrediting teams, so it's practitioners and faculty. The portfolio assessment groups are really diverse. Is there a credit limit? No. And what's really nice about Vermont has been doing this since the mid-70s, and so actually our director travels around the country as a consultant. She's been to Hawaii, she's been to different places. What's really nice about Vermont and different is that early on, Vermont made a decision that students could ask for any number of credits, and it wasn't about how many credits they could afford. So everybody pays the same amount. You pay the tuition, there's an assessment, a portfolio assessment fee, and then if you get 20 credits, or you get 100 credits, or you get 3 credits, everybody pays the same. In other states, it's been really what you can afford. So you go through the assessment process, and then you're assessed a fee based on how many credits your portfolio you've been deemed to earn. And that has been, that's hugely problematic. And so when we go around to different states talking about this, it's great that Vermont developed that process because once you get used to that revenue, there's no going back. Vermont has never had that model, and I'm pleased about that.
So seamless acceptance of credits
Within the
across-
VSC.
within the VSC?
Yeah. Many schools, and this is schools are really losing out with private and public schools who are not accepting assessed credit, because that is sort of what is happening in today's world. And people are really, because, I think there's a recognition that you don't want to waste your time and your money. If you've been in business for 10 years, did you have to take, or introduction to business, if you can demonstrate that you have that learning. And so, one of the things that's the only place in Vermont that really doesn't take assessed learning, assessed credit is UVM. And they are working, there are a lot of people within the college, the university that really are appalled at that. But right now, the policy is that UVM does not take assessed credit. But I don't know of another school in Vermont that does not take assessed credit.
Is it a one semester?
It's a one semester, but then it takes the following semester to assess your portfolio. So if you take it in the fall, you get your credit no later than the end of the spring semester. But we usually have, I think it's around a couple hundred students every semester going through. It's not insignificant, right? It's between 100 and 200 students, I can't remember exactly. It varies.
And it's one of the most significant pathways for students going into Johnson's external degree program. If they could bring in 60 credits out of that portfolio.
Okay, for the sake of time, should introduce that we've had another trustee join us, Jim Maslin, down at the end of the table. So, thanks for coming, Jim.
Bill?
Yes. So the first item up there is consolidation of legal services, mostly just to support my own personal power and authority. But what we've done recently, and you all know, the addition of Sophie, which as the Associate General Counsel, which has, I think, vastly improved both the quality and the quantity of legal services that we can provide at the central office. Before, we had to do this through outside counsel, which is expensive, folks who don't necessarily know the system and know the people within it. And so what we've done is to add an associate general counsel that has significantly cut down on the use of outside counsel. The other new addition, and this is a newsflash, we've just hired an investigator trainer. And this has come out of the need because of the federal government's focus and everyone's focus on concerns about safety on campus, sexual assault, discrimination, that sort of thing. We've always had non-discrimination, sexual assault policies, but the focus on that from the federal government has just really emphasized the need to not only have the kinds of investigative processes in place, but also the investigative talent in place. Before, we've been using people, deans and other administrators on campus to investigate complaints. It's clear, based on what's going on, that you need trained and professional investigators. And in addition, you need significant training. And training not only of students, but also of administrators, faculty, investigators, and other staff at the colleges. And so what we did is combined a position of investigator and trainer to meet all of those needs on the campuses in the central office rather than doing that campus by campus. This was something that I think all the campuses had been clamoring for because what we were doing is we were taking people who already had more than full-time jobs and asking them to conduct investigations and provide training and arrange training and everything else. So now that will be done out of the central office.
And we negotiate, contracts for the faculty, staff, full part-time faculty lunch for all the college.
Right. Right.
And this is an observation. It's probably a wrong observation, but this was sort of a new need that's brought on by, it's been there for a long time, but increasing federal pressure. And it may have been easier to figure out how to do this once before each one of the colleges had developed something. So it's probably more difficult to go backwards and say, okay, I know you do, you already do this, but now maybe we ought to just do it once. And I think it's just an interesting thought I had while I was listening to you fellas. I mean, it's been great to have the support of the campuses recognizing that this is going to save them all money and have consistency.
It also avoids, and conflict of interest is really the wrong word, but the conflicts that come from people on the campus investigating their own circumstances. And so it's nice to have a little bit of independence coming from the central office on that as well. We are, by the way, for what it's worth, we're going to maintain a system where we do have somebody locally in each campus assisting that investigator in each case that comes up. So we will have a collaborative approach to our investigations.
Thank you. Tom?
I can speak briefly to the next two. The student billing position was a campus-based position quite a few years ago when we brought that position into the chancellor's office, since it's so closely related to cash flow. Because the bills need to be precise so we can pay precisely 30 days later. So that's something we watch carefully, as well as the cash from it. And so that's very closely related to the tuition and fees report, and that person takes that and puts it into the billing table. The next one is the human resources. That's an opportunity we have, is to make the HR section more web-based rather than people having to fill out forms and hand it to someone who then sits down and puts it into a computer. We want to train people to put it in the computer the first time. And so I think there will be a lot of efficiency gained if we start moving more towards a self-help environment. Bill, do you want to talk about the Title IX coordinator?
Well, the Title IX coordinator is related back to the consolidation of legal services. And this also comes from a lot of pressure at the federal government. We have used our administrators on each campus who already have 7 other jobs to also be the Title IX coordinator, or the ADA coordinator, or the 504 coordinator, or whatever. But because of the, again, added influence of the new federal laws and regulations, we're looking at this point, having a consolidated Title IX coordinator. Each campus now has somebody in that position. We're going to try and see if that's something we could perform out of the central office and do well out of the central office. And we think that also could have a lot of benefits.
So Tom, you want to, Martha?
I'm assuming when we talk efficiencies, we're talking financial as well as time and getting the job done in a timely manner. It's not just financial, correct?
It's both if we could save money and if we can spend our money more effectively.
Yeah, and it's not just getting the job done. In some cases, it's getting the job done better.
That's what I was going to add.
On that sort of allows someone to become more expert in it full-time, and there's a bunch of part-time people. So there's efficiency gained in that kind of knowledge as well.
Elaine, let's move to the next page and get Tom on the stand.
A lot of this you folks have seen throughout the finance committees, the coordinated, the financial reporting, the audits, the cash management. There are 3 things we always think of. How do we increase revenue? How do we decrease costs? How do we increase efficiency? And at the same time, we have to comply with certain laws and regulations. When we look at this, it's behind the numbers. We've got 5 colleges, the Chancellor's Office, we've got Small Business Development, Vermont Manufacturing Extension Corp, and Vermont Interactive Technology. So there's a lot of numbers rolling up into this stuff. And so to do this, we've got to be consistent. We have to go through and to get to the financial statements, for example. When we first started doing the quarterly reporting about 10 years ago, people were putting fuel oil in different accounts, and now everybody puts it in fuel oil. And so that's allowed us to be, because there was miscellaneous energy and all kinds of stuff. But so that has allowed us to become more efficient in a lot of areas. The And another thing I was thinking of, and I won't bore you because you've all seen this, but for the cash management, we used to, the local checks would go to the local banks, and then we would have to withdraw money from the local banks to put it into our concentration account to earn more money. Since then, every college has a digital check reader, and they just run the checks through, and it goes right into our operating account. And so, although we've always sort of been doing cash management, it's much faster now to the account that earns the most interest. So, I'd be happy to answer any questions. As I said, you guys have seen a lot of that already.
Just a comment. Tom, is it fair to say that at least some of these achievements are a result of the auditing process that we go through, or processes that we go through?
For this list, probably not. I mean, we have the second bullet item, the BSC internal audit, was born from the external audit findings. And so we had a couple of years where we had the same finding. And so we thought we needed to put some internal focus on it as well. And so that actually has been from the external auditors. And we've gone less financial audit internally, and now we're more operational audit. So we're making sure everybody does their P card stuff the same way, or their T&E reports the same way, which isn't necessarily financial audit.
So the next page is the opportunities we're working on.
And so the opportunities there are many. Right now, the energy audits, we are working with Efficiency Vermont to review at the campuses how they can become more efficient in their energy usage, whether that be through their HVAC systems or changing their lights. And that's going to happen across the system. Solar net metering. A lot of solar companies now need retail clients to sell their solar power to, so we're talking with solar companies how we can help them do that and save money. As we look across the system, we've got 5, if you include the Chancellor's Office, 6 sort of identical business models. So we've got similar positions across the entire organization. And so part of the study we've been doing is seeing how we can reduce those kind of redundant positions across the system. We do think there's ample opportunity there to save money. One thing we don't have right now is a dedicated collections person at each college, and I think because of that we may be writing off more than we should, and so we're analyzing to see if that can pay for itself, as well as a dedicated purchasing position. Right now we've got all the entities have various people who do various purchasing. We're thinking that if we pool all the purchasing power together through one person, that would actually save us a lot of money at the end. And then the grants resource, we've been having that conversation about, there could be a lot of grants out there that we could be getting that perhaps we're not because we don't have the staffing for it. And also from a compliance perspective, grant regulations are changing all the time, so to make sure we have an expert there that would help us be able to do that.
I love conversations, but I like completions. Is there a time frame for any of this to happen? Are we talking 6 months, 3 months? In my lifetime.
In your lifetime, for sure. Jeb has assigned to me the consolidation of 2 areas this year. So, I mean, we were actively looking right now at purchasing and collections and the energy audits and the solar net metering we're doing. We also have teams looking across the system at positions and functions and how that would look differently. So we're having active conversations. And a lot of it is getting background information. How many transactions do you do? How many transactions happen across the system? And then how many transactions can one person do at a time? And then it's the math from there. And oftentimes we've got one person does 4 different jobs. And so we also have to tease out what that means to the other positions if this goes away. But that is the goal this year, is to have some of this resolved.
So you could report back to us in 6 months or sometime?
Absolutely. The church has told me I have to do it every month, so.
Well, I just think we talk about things that we need to do.
Understood. And I'm we definitely have people doing definite things, but I'm sort of being not as precise at this point.
Diane Pollock is our Chief Information Officer.
So the next two slides that I have, and I'm not going to go into all of the detail of it, is all of the software that we use in an effort to do consolidation from an information technology perspective. The top one I will speak a little bit about is Colleague, because I believe at your last meeting there was some discussion about how there may be some dissatisfaction with Colleague. And Colleague is actually our student ERP system. It's also the business process ERP system. So we have student records as well as financial records in one system for all 5 colleges plus the Chancellor's Office. This was a result of the SASE project that was started in 1999. The software was actually implemented in 2002. The interesting thing about Colleague is that we have put in customization to make it work for 5 colleges. If we were one single entity, we would be able to remove a lot of the customization and use a more vendor-delivered software product. Thus, it would be more efficient for the programming staff not to have to support customization. We can move on to bigger and better or other softwares. The other thing about Colleague is part of the dissatisfaction is a result of the reporting that comes out of it. It does a great job of maintaining our records, but when you want a management report out of it, it's not so good at it. And most student ERP systems are like that. You need to hire a reporting staff, programming staff to develop the reports. So that's one part of it. The other part of the dissatisfaction is the fact that 5 colleges have to compromise their business process in order to use a single software. So they may have done something a different way, have to change the business process to work with the software. And normally when you're implementing software, you massage the software in order to make it work with the business process. But we had to do some compromising at the business level to make 5 colleges do the same process using the same software. So that's the other compromising part. We do customizations on Colleague if I have 5 colleges that are have 3 of the 5 colleges in agreement with the type of customization that needs to be done for their business process. With the exception of CCV, if CCV has a unique process because community college operates differently, we actually allow those go through and put in those customizations so they can function as a community college versus a standard 4-year college. So the other systems, we've progressively
Can I
gone...
say one thing about that one? Just in just real layman's language, one of the things I think is good news is that, I mean, you could go, we already could go as a student and say, I want to take art history, and it would list you art history at every one of our colleges.
Yes.
So, I mean, it has the potential to do a lot of what we want to do. And I'm thinking some of it is like making sure that we do enough, I mean, continuing to work to get it to work better, but also training of our entire user base out there on what it can do for us. And I don't know, how much we've done of that or what opportunities there are there. But I was surprised to learn some of the things that I actually think, what I've heard from members of the student, faculty, board, constituency groups, this platform has the capacity to do for us.
The sort of institutional research data I mentioned before, we wouldn't be able to do that without having a single system and sort of leverage that efficiency to produce data for our colleges. They'd each be on their own end.
And so to add on to the Colleague piece, there's a web component that allows a student interface that's linked into our portal. And if you look down through the list of things, we do have a common portal for the 5 colleges that is branded by college, and provides resources to a student and to faculty and staff from multiple colleges if they are have those associations. So I can be a student at Johnson, a staff member at BTC, and be teaching at the community college, and I will actually see resources from all 5 colleges, or all those 3 colleges, branded for the college that I need the information from. All done within one system. And linking back into the colleague system for student registration, for, on the faculty side, class rosters, for bill payment, those sort of things. We've consolidated our identity management. So we have, everyone in the VSC organization has one identity with one user ID and one password to get through most of our systems. Some systems we require separate passwords, mostly for a security purpose, or that the vendor doesn't integrate with it. We have a common document imaging system to support our business processes. Let's see, moving on to the next slide. Getting into more of the kind of technical hardware side of things. Because of Tropical Storm Irene, you're all well aware of the fact that we have a new data center, it's not so new anymore, up at Tech Vault. But we also have a completely redundant data center at Winooski, pared down a little bit to support our key business processes, but fully capable of handling a significant outage. During this time, we've always had we've had a consolidated network since 1990 something. As part of the Tropical Storm Irene, we went through a renegotiation with our network vendors, and we actually just recently did it last year as well. So what we've been doing is actually increasing capacity for our wide area networks at the same time as we are actually reducing network costs. So where we stand right now, we have a significantly less expensive network with far more capacity. And if you're interested in the numbers, we can get them for you, but I figured I'd keep it at a higher level. We also, in the past couple of years, have implemented a web app, or a mobile app, that is useful to students and faculty. It's available on Google Play, which is an Android device, as well as through iTunes and the Apple Store. And most recently, in this past year, we've consolidated email systems, so we execute on one email system for all 5 colleges in the Chancellor's Office. And that also has given us the ability, using Office 365 from Microsoft, to provide Microsoft Office to all of our students, faculty, and staff at no cost, as well as some cloud applications for file storage and things like that through something that's called OneDrive. And we will be implementing Skype for Business because Microsoft now owns that. And that comes as part of that package. So the interesting thing about Skype for Business is we're exploring the elimination of Adobe Connect, because if we can use Skype for Business to do the teaching and the connections that we do with Adobe Connect, we might as well use something that we have already licensed and eliminated an additional cost there. And then finally, our current project is Recruiter, which is a centralized application process, student application process, and a recruitment tool that allows us to work with a student from the point of, like, they call it a suspect. So it's a student in 8th grade who's just considering college and how to market to them through all the way through to prospect and applicant and eventually student. So questions on the software? Yes?
What is the mobile app? What is the function of that?
The mobile application is pretty much strictly for convenience, and it allows the student, it has our campus maps on it, it has just recently this year, a registration component, a lookup function that can get their grades on it,
Right.
Those kind of things.
Nice.
Do you think most of the students know about it and know how to use it and realize the power it has?
They know about it. They don't know about the registration yet because we just completed the implementation for that, and we're waiting for actually the publication through iTunes, and we'll be marketing that as they come in this fall.
That's great.
They do know they can get their grades on it because they're like, that part we know. And they can actually pay their bills through it, but they're not as eager to do that.
That's great.
Well, thank you, Diane.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I know that the board is and the committee members are used to working with Tom and Bill and Elaine and Yasmin, they're getting used to. And I don't know how much chance they've had to interact with you, but I just would like to say that I have been so impressed with you taking over as a CIO. And,
Thank you very much.
Your prior experience and your knowledge of what we do and your ability to lead your team is really fantastic. So thank you for that. I just thought I'd like to tell you that now.
You're welcome, and I appreciate being able to interact with you. It's a new experience for me. So we have some additional IT consolidation opportunities that are just kind of ideas that are being floated right now. We have TechVault as a data center, and we have virtualized systems within that data center. There is a possibility that we could create a Vermont State College's cloud and actually provide server opportunities for all 5 colleges so that none of the hardware or a portion of the hardware components that exist at the colleges could be brought in centrally and managed from an operational perspective centrally here. So we would have to look at the staffing involved with expanding that, and also what the cost would be to move the equipment around. The other option is something that was brought up by something that came through something the University of Maine system is doing, which is the actual consolidation of all IT services, meaning help desk services that are out at the colleges. Essentially, we support the wide area network, but we don't support local area networks out at the colleges. So that kind of support, student IT questions, those kind of things, and how you could do that centrally versus in a distributed environment. And everybody is always saying to me, well, I don't think we can do that. Well, in a former position, I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank, and I actually consolidated their IT help desk. So I'm like, if I can do it at the Federal Reserve Bank level, I'm pretty sure we can do something similar at the Vermont State Colleges and provide good service. I mean, because that's what it's all about, is the service that you need to provide to your customers. So those are our opportunities at this point anyway.
Thank you for speaking in English.
Yeah, that's
You're
another
welcome. I try hard.
Diane was at the Federal Reserve before going to IBM and before coming here, so she's been at some pretty high-quality places. That's great. Okay, so thank you very much to that team. We're now just going to run through as quickly as I can get us through, just explaining what the other follow-up information is, and it was in your board materials. This presentation that we just went through here on the operational efficiencies, Elaine will make sure we have that attached to the minutes, and so if people want to refer to that back, they can find that easy. It was
Just a real quick request, what would be, I think would be really helpful for me anyway, and hopefully the others on the committee, is just kind of a single sheet with all of the different opportunities from Yasmin, Diane, and Tom and Bill, have all the opportunities in one place.
Okay.
That would be really helpful.
Great. Good idea. The question was asked if we have some kind of a compilation of all the academic programs offered by VSC, by college and degree, and I think ultimately the kind of sorting of that will be most interesting. What we have here in your materials is a comprehensive list of all the courses offered by college. I think at the high level what you see is actually there are more that aren't duplicated everywhere than are. And some of the ones that are your sort of bigger programs, or more ones that like business or education, where depending on what part of the state no matter what part of the state you're from, that's sort of like a high demand program. And a lot of our students are commuters around at those colleges. But I think what would be interesting is if we can sort this more and say, okay, well, which of the programs that are offered, like in a nice short list of 3 or more colleges, let's say, for example, and start working that way. But you have in your package the information that was asked for is a list of all the academic programs. And it was also, I think, Bill Lippert that asked the question, well, what happens to the students at CCV after they leave CCV? And Joyce's team did an excellent job of putting together a short summary that kind of demonstrates that. And I thought it's in your package, it's terrific. But you wanted to spend...
Well, I just would say, what we try to do is to look at the patterns of graduates, which we can track easily, and then patterns of students who come and take courses at CTV and then transfer. So you'll see that the majority of our graduates, more than half of them, almost 2/3, go to the VSC. You'll see Johnson EDP is a very big winner, and also Vermont Tech. And then you'll see the bottom is really students who come here and take some courses, and where do they go? I mean, what's pretty interesting is we have students in 42 states right now who have been at CTV and now are at different schools. So it's just information as background, but you'll see that, it's not insignificant numbers.
Great. Thank you, Joyce. And with Joyce speaking, that reminds me, I should have said, Jerry, that both Joe Bertolino and Barbara Murphy had prior commitments at professional organizations, so I said, please, by all means, just keep those. Elaine Collins, the incoming president of Johnson State College, left Michigan at 6 or 5 this morning to start driving here, and we said, just keep driving. I don't know what the cell service is like there, but we'll do it. So I would mention the fact that we have Dave on the phone, Dan, and Joyce with us, and the other ones that seem for this conversation would be okay figure here, if everybody knows. Heidi had asked a question about the VSC Foundation, and I'm going to turn this over to Tom because I don't have a lot of experience in it, but the big piece of it to me is that we do have one, and one, we have one, and two, we're not making much use of it. That would be
There
my
are some
observation.
opportunities
Yeah,
there,
right.
I think,
So I think,
or potential.
we have some opportunities ahead. And Tom, you want to just do just a brief overview?
Sure.
And then we'll move right along.
The VSC Foundation was established probably 8 or 10 years ago because our official designation is we're a component unit of the state of Vermont, so that doesn't get a lot of play with donors. And so we established the foundation as a 501c3 for that. It probably runs 20 transactions through a year. Maybe the average year is probably $30,000 annually. And basically it's a conduit, so it would be given to the foundation and it would be sent right out to the college. There are 7 directors, the chancellor, the CFO, and the 5 college presidents. Right now, David Walk is the president because we always assign that to him. He wears it proudly. And that's about it, really. The checks, we've had 2 checks for $250,000 each, but usually the average check is probably $500. Again, it could be utilized a lot more.
It's something that I think, I know that there's interest in the board, there's interest in the chancellor's office. I think right now we're talking $25,000 or $30,000 in the whole thing, so we're really not. I don't know whether Michael or Ames want to comment on this, but what I've learned so far in my 6 months on the job is that at least until fairly recently, philanthropy and fundraising wasn't like a big part of a lot of public colleges and universities. I'm thinking that as revenues are stagnating from their traditional source of state appropriations, that more are starting to get aggressive in these areas, or trying to get more active. Would that be a fair statement? Or?
I think that's true. Over the last couple decades, as you've seen that slide of overall public support for higher education and public higher education specifically, I think there has been certainly increase in the creation of public higher ed related foundations and their uses.
I think there are just a couple things about that. That's absolutely the case. I think it can be really overstated as a replacement. At the end of the day, state appropriations and tuition will remain overwhelmingly big. So that perception of people, we can just get private donors, this will solve the financial problem, is not the case. The other point is, I think you can take advantage of this at the system level. we talk about this later, you're going to need resources in order to facilitate the kind of collaboration among faculties and everything across the system. Because the pressures are overwhelmingly at a campus level, to generate revenue through enrollment. You need something to balance that and resources to really invest in faculty time on joint efforts, that kind of thing. And that's not in lieu of, it's not put one versus the other, it's just,
It's an excellent point. I think it's a great point. And also is, even though we're not very active with our foundation, that doesn't mean the colleges aren't active in trying to solicit, and they do. And one of the touchy things is that, whatever we do at the system or the chancellor's office level needs to be very careful not to interfere with relationships that are already out there, and right.
I could give you horror stories from childhood about that. You need to be really sure you don't confuse things, but it's also important as a system level to make sure you don't confuse donors.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's what we have so far, and I'm sure we're going to come back to that at subsequent meetings of this committee or the finance committee or both, and so forth. It was also asked if we could compile some examples of small state education systems. Elaine put this together. I thought it was pretty good. I don't know if you want to share any comments or any takeaways for you. I actually have one or two, but I'd be interested. Elaine, no, please, you do it. You did the work.
I've never been asked to say anything in the Basically, I researched the 12 smallest state systems. Wyoming is the least populous state, and then Idaho is the 12th one that I stopped with, and 6 of them are under 1 million in population in the state. And some of them have indications of undergrad and graduate level programs, but there's a mix. There's only 3 that are actually single systems, like Penn State, where there's one university with different locations. There's multiple systems that have universities and colleges. Some also have community colleges, and some also have technical colleges, all blended. So it's really a variety, and I think it's basically generated by, or driven by geography and where the population lives and the needs of the individual state. It doesn't look like anyone's sticking to a particular formula. So it's really what works best for the state.
Yeah.
Ames wrote the
That's why you should speak up. That was very well done.
That's what I've spent my life writing on. I think she did an excellent summary for you to keep in mind. These are idiosyncratic based on each state's unique needs. Big message is don't pick up a model for somebody else to just impose on Vermont. Look at your own issues and history and culture.
Just a quick thought, it would be interesting how many of the states are also static, or how many of them are actually sitting in their offices wondering the same things that we're wondering.
Just about everybody except North Dakota and maybe Wyoming.
And you find that those states ask less questions because of the ability to fund things through natural resources.
Yeah, that's
range of things. I did have, there's an interesting outreach even here in our own state from the University of Vermont in the way that they're budgeting around in discrete revenue centers now. So as the university is actually disaggregating its budgeting based on individual colleges, the arts and sciences, engineering, and making them function as individual profit centers as opposed to doing things more cohesively together. So it's sort of the opposite direction that we've been inquiring as a system. So
that was done just as a message on that. What universities have tried to do that, they totally fragment focus on mission and connection. So they will come back in time and say, how do you pull it together? Because you suddenly don't have a university. I mean, I'm a graduate of Penn, which was a leader on that. It was really Penn, Indiana, and University of Southern California that were leaders on that. And it works okay if you really maintain centrally the incentives, the funds to in fact tax and subsidy policy to get the pieces to work and play together. But arts, humanities simply are not good profit centers. So you have to have work on cross-subsidy for the places to work. So, I just am really, every tub on its own bottom will lead to every tub running off on its own course, disconnected from any sense of mission. But maybe that's what you want.
No, I wasn't. I just be,
That's our
a particular situation of my tub would suggest that I definitely don't want
The tub
We'll
part.
let him run off on it.
So I was, just to be clear, I mean, I was just trying to make a point about
A
the fact that,
descriptive.
the fact that there's nobody who's sitting on their current status and thinking, we're good.
Oh,
You know,
no.
Everybody's exploring these same kind of questions, but often coming from, a different position, so.
And since it's for the public, we ought to say UVM's doing really good things. Working.
Johnny?
Of note to me, at least, were the two states that have K through 20 boards, and I'd like at some point to hear from our two experts about their take on that, and if that's even a trend that they're seeing nationally, at least people talking about a real focus on total public education.
I'd just give you a quick answer to that. I just spent 18 months with the legislature and the governor of Rhode Island unraveling up the perfect mess on that. And there are a whole lot of reasons to coordinate between K-12 and higher ed, but you don't want to integrate governance and administration. And that was done in Rhode Island simply actually because of a political battle. Had no rationale, and they dreamt up the music to support it later on. And the truth is that the K-12 issues are so different, they overwhelm any attention to higher education. The single board spent nine-tenths of its time on that, and there was no attention to the issues that are before this board. There was no attention to leading a system because it was dominated. So Rhode Island, in fact, then disaggregated the system and has basically two things. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be working together on a broader agenda.
Yeah, you need to distinguish between coordination and governance, because I think Amos makes a really important point.
There are all sorts of things that need to be thought about in terms of college preparation. And it's not only youth, a lot of it has to do with issues of adults. The coordination of workforce development and other things. So.
That's right. So we saw a period in the last probably decade where we saw, speaking of pendula and sort of, how things take their course, we saw, particularly in the first half of the last decade, a lot of really serious state work around this notion of integrating systems as well as coordination. Probably less so in terms of governance, which is a good thing, but we saw a number of states create sort of joint coordinating boards. And, the reality is some of those were successful. Many of them sort of have run out of steam a little bit. They've been somewhat dependent on governors and other sort of personalities. They've been a little bit idiosyncratic. But I think the challenge remains the same. You would want to be very cautious around confusing governance, though, with the need to integrate and to align and to coordinate, which I think is certainly a mission for the work that you're doing here. And certainly remains a topic, I think, for every state and every New England state to figure out how do you continue to sort of energize that and move it forward, because I think to Amos' point, there's a lot of critical work that really needs to be done, particularly if when you consider where, if we were to grow our college-going populations, it would be dependent on more effective K through 12 post-secondary alignment because of the needs of getting less prepared secondary students to be more prepared and more into the systems.
One thing, I think people know this, and then I'm sorry to jump in, but compared to many other states, like our state where Michael spent most of his time in Massachusetts, we don't have a state higher education regulatory board like many states do. And ever since I was at the time young state senator and Chuck Bunting was the chancellor of the state colleges, it was always perceived as a luxury that we didn't have that in Vermont because it was just going to get in our way. So I don't think anything's really changed. I'm just pointing out that we don't have, like in Massachusetts, they have a commissioner of higher education, and they've got a whole department like our Department of Education. They come up with regulations, and if you wanted to convert to a university, you got to go through all these regulations and this and that. On this SARA stuff, where we're trying to figure out how to how to regulate these, to make it easier to regulate online courses, internet courses. Everybody's agreed except not the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education. So,
So now let me give you, Jeb invited us in here to be a counter to him. You absolutely do not need a regulatory thing. What you totally lack, which most other states now have, is a broader agenda and goals that link all this together, which is not regulatory. There's nothing that really says this is the future of Vermont.
Well, the only thing I would differ with you, and that's why you're here, but we just want to point out, we do have something called a pre-16 council.
Yeah, I just written a giant paper about this. I would distinctly separate this and not connect it with regulation. So what you really need is, what you may well have, is just a broad consensus among the leadership of the state that you're really after these things. And the problem is that states that set up structures increasingly have become regulatory, and they've not been doing what I've been describing them. So, in other words, what you really need is a way, and we're struggling with this in Connecticut. What Connecticut needs is not another regulatory agency. But what they do need is consensus on the goals that the legislature just enacted that said that the future of Connecticut depends upon getting this number of people through to a degree and a higher ed system that's connected to future life chances of people in Connecticut. So that's something that is very different, that their current regulatory agency is really a pain and it's totally ineffective. So it's just the distinction I want to emphasize.
It's a good one. And I think, even with our pre-K 16 council, just an observation is they tend to focus mainly on pre-K 12. I mean, even in that setting, which is not regulatory, it's supposed to be the big picture, the higher ed doesn't get much attention.
It's usually the business and civic leadership that does this, not
But the state colleges is leading an effort, and we hope to get a word on a grant from the Lumina Foundation in the next day or 3 or 5, let's say by, 1st of July or somewhere around there, that we're trying to build a consensus on, ours is 60% by 2020 with post-secondary credentials of some kind. And that's been a goal that the state college has been involved with for a long time, and it was adopted by the state, but we decided we're going to try to pick up the stroke here a little bit, and he asked me to just did the homework on that, and hopefully we're going to succeed.
So that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Church. Just a quick point, under the column governing body, if there's any way we can refine whether these are truly governing bodies or oversight regulatory bodies.
Which ones are they?
Well, there's a common element in all of them. Now, I cannot fathom being a trustee for 12 institutions. I can't imagine what the agenda.
They're trustees.
What the agenda must look like. I mean, how they must deal with the very rarefied edge of those institutions.
Yeah, but the board for the University of Wisconsin system, is that scope?
I'd love to speak to somebody.
No,
How do you do that?
No,
We
I
have enough
just-
challenges with our own system.
I spent 8 years as a trustee of the system with, let's see, 5 universities, 5 colleges, one of which turned it into a university for the benefit of Newcastle. And one of the messages, I just met with another board like this, what you have to do is think of yourself as leading a system and that agenda, that cross-cutting agenda. But you really need to think of yourself as advocates for each of your constituent units also. And systems really fail to do, actually what they do is they swim in the middle. They're neither understand the system role, nor do they understand their constituent units, because you are the board of trustees for each one of these units. And you need to know the differences. So that's why, sir, you're absolutely right. The larger places don't really understand the cross-cutting role, and they tend to hover around the 1 or 2 places they know and ignore the other ones. So you've got a much more manageable span.
I'd also say I think we're lucky when I look at this list that we have a manageable number of trustees. Like, when I look at New Hampshire and see 27 trustees, or in Delaware 28, I go, oh, yeah, maybe that's a good thing, but it sounds like,
My board had 9, and the terms were too limited, so you had a real continuity problem. But so I think you're in a good position. Anyway, that's
great stuff. So there was another article. Moving on to the next piece. The question was asked, well, what experiences of other colleges had shifting to universities? And Elaine tried to do some research, and I think we don't need to spend a lot of time on that because I think we're going to hear from Michael and Ames on that topic. But she came up with this one article that sort of was somebody that I think wrote a dissertation or something named Jim Austin. I don't know if you guys ever heard of him or not, but it basically, I think the sum and substance of this one was, it depends. Did you read it?
Yeah, it was interesting reading, but it wasn't really definitive.
Right. Then there was a question the church had asked one-on-one that we thought was a good question, so we put it in here on the current Carnegie classification for the Vermont State Colleges. And that's on page 67 of your article, and it has Castleton as a baccalaureate, Johnson, Master, Small, Linden, Vermont Tech, and CCB. And then Tony Peffer had done a little background work on as it relates to Castleton, and it is what it is. The only thing I wasn't really sure of, to tell you the truth, is, and I don't know if I ever got an answer to it, I might have, was, how often they update their classifications and how you go about it. Because if I got it right, like 5 years ago, I don't mean to get in this discussion, just as it relates to this, I don't know how often they update it, because Castleton had 2 master's degrees 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and 8 now. So, but it's not generating a lot of graduates yet. But I don't know how often do they update the classifications? Do you know the answer to that, Tony? Or maybe James or Michael do?
I think I do. It's really at the end of each report cycle. So we have enough graduate degrees now, but we don't yet have enough graduates, and that'll put us into the next category as soon as we start graduating.
What was curious to me is how much significance is held in these definitions, or whatever the classification would, what does it mean? So, I mean, I was very surprised to see that all 5 of our institutions are different. And so, what's the significance of that? Who pays attention to that? And
maybe that gets into our conversation.
okay,
Yeah,
great.
just
And good,
The
perfect.
answer is, it depends.
Okay. Go wait.
So, Mr. Chairman, that takes us to the end of the follow-up agenda. And so that would take us to item 3, right?
Yes, it would.
So do you want to do an intro on that, or want
I'm
me
just
to
going
do
to
it?
let you do it.
Well, okay, I can. Actually, we sent out an email that Jerry and I worked on together that we shared with Michael and Ames, and then we sent out to all you guys, and we asked them to come here to help us think through 2 big questions. Following up from, I know this is an oversimplification, but following up from the strategic inquiry, and I think if I got it right, unanimous desire by the board to figure out how we can best become a more comprehensive, cohesive, and interconnected system, with some recognition that we need distinctive, institutions within the overall system. What's the best way to do that? And we laid out for them to comment on it. There may be more than this. Either the oversimplification of the Penn State model with a single accreditation, lots of campuses, a UMaine system kind of thing where they are independently accredited, own presidents, but they have a same sort of branded University of Maine, Presque Isle, Augusta, Fort Kent, or a system sort of like just a system like we are, only maybe to a next step of evolution, or maybe SUNY is even kind of close to that, in that there is a system, but there are independent institutions within it. So, and with different names, University at Albany or whatever it is. And that was one. And then the second question was, depending on the direction that the board would like to go, would it make sense for Castleton to convert to a university or not? And I think what we wanted to do is try to take those independently. And I don't think we need a lot of context for the first one. I mean, it's just that we want to do what we can to be as student-friendly, customer-friendly as we can, offer them the best educational experience we possibly can. And we think that operating more as an interconnected, cohesive system will help us with the student experience. We're also hoping that it will allow us to make sure that we're spending the money we already spend to the maximum effect we can get. And I think, given which I'm assuming you're going to confirm, that there aren't a lot of states out there that have a lot of extra money right now, that we need to get efficiencies wherever we can and figure out how we can deliver the quality education at as low cost as we can possibly do. So the first question was, what do you think about the options there?
Maybe on this, I should say, my voice is very loud to me, but I found historically my voice is very soft, so if I'm not projecting as you urge. I just want to make a couple of comments and think just about my men approaching you all and seeing the background materials. My disposition is that you are absolutely on the right direction. And I think you're doing the right things, and I would put that in the category, you've already had a lot of momentum around the Castleton issue. So I just want to say that so that you don't take comments I'm making and saying that I'm just reflecting on Vermont. Maybe if I say I'm talking about everybody other than Vermont, maybe just as a matter of background, I started my life actually putting together the University of Maine system. My first job was, in fact, chief of staff for the first chancellor. So naming the campuses and putting that system together. But the good news is that was before most of you were born. So, I'm pretty, you don't recall the details of it, but I've been deeply involved in Maine for a variety of reasons in terms of current activity. The other thing is that I did spend a long time on a board that's about this size for the state colleges in Colorado. The board was subsequently not around, but they were small state colleges, one of which, Metropolitan State College in Denver, is now redesignated a university. So in some respects, that was a system of colleges and university in that way that made that change. The other thing is that I've spent my life on understanding issues of governance and coordination. But in particular, my colleague and I, Dennis Jones, are dealing with a particular problem of using data to try to get states to focus on the needs of the state, defining the needs of the state. In fact, beginning with the needs of the state and the population and the economy, rather than necessarily the institutions. And I don't want to do that as an either or, but a lot of the conversations are essentially summing the interest of the individual institutions. Our question is constantly, these are state institutions. If you look at Vermont, you serve a number of students from other states, but this is a really critical resource if you put together the community college and these colleges. For people in Vermont, these are really critical institutions, and that's for educational opportunities. So now the reality of the matter is we are constantly just raising the issue that you raised, Jeff. People have the perception that there's more money, but there really isn't. If you look at the places I'm working with right now, I've spent hours I'm staffing a legislative committee in Connecticut, which has a deficit. My biggest battles this year have been working with Wisconsin and one can get into the politics of Governor Walker and everything, but the reality of the matter is that no matter how you cut it, and no matter who is governor of Wisconsin, there absolutely is no additional reason, or there are no additional resources. Basically things related to health care, infrastructure, a whole set of other things. Plus, frankly, the population is very conservative these days and very resistant to tax increases. So to suddenly think that Wisconsin or these other states have more resources. So, and the other thing is that the demands of the public, and again, what Yasmin is working on, the expectation is that you really will have a better educated population. So you're having the demands, I think, increase and the resources going down. And if you look at indebtedness, it's really frightening. I mean, the reality of the matter is that most of your institutions are at the pretty high level of indebtedness, ranging from probably, I think it ranges from around 25,000 to around 38,000, depending on which institution, graduating from your state institutions, with a fair number, high percentage of Pell eligible students. So this is not, you're really maxed out on what students and families can contribute. A lot of what I felt exciting about what Jeb mentioned was that I think you can do something really exciting, but I would say absolutely essential. Well, this is what's happening around the country, that basically small state colleges that evolved to imagine they were universities, broadened the scope of what they're doing, a mile wide and an inch thick, are dying. They basically have maxed out on their ability to charge students. They have no state revenue, and they simply are not competitive in their markets. So you're going to see a real struggling, and what I think is almost the dying process, and the politics of that played out throughout the country. A subtext of Wisconsin is not what's happening at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's that several of the institutions within the Wisconsin system are simply unsustainable. The subtext of Maine is that actually Fort Kent and Machias in particular are not sustainable. Presque Isle, sort of. Farmington, sort of. But there is no more money to sustain these institutions. And so what you're having states have to do is something which I think, frankly, you have the benefits of being a small system. I think these are sort of a list of things. You have to have a clear sense of what the real priorities are for the state. You can't just begin, we're trying to have a set of places survive. Secondly, you have to really recognize that it's important for places to still exist. In other words, for you to say, oh, well, we're no longer going to serve that region of the state. It's really important that regions continue to be served and you continue to provide high-quality service. Thirdly, you've got to do it in a dramatically different way. It's very similar to the hospital situation. You cannot still have a full-service hospital, but the people in that region still need service. And they need to do it through collaboration to make sure that the people in that area have service. So rethinking the way the systems function in order that they can be better connected with the state, make sure that every region is served, that you have the range of services still can be provided. If that isn't happening, what you're going to see is just a slow deterioration of the nation's capacity to deal with anything. So that's what we're dealing with from one place to another. I've spent a lot of time this last legislative session in Maine simply because the University of Maine Board of Trustees is having a conversation very similar to yours. Maine went through a process of saying, well, we're a system of 7 universities all working together, and you've got to be fooling yourself. There are several of them that are simply way too small. I was partly responsible for naming them that. We sat on the floor of Howard Johnson's and named each of the campuses. But on the other hand, you need to make sure that in Aroostook County there is still a viable opportunity. And but what's happening in Maine is that all the forces that resist that change are feeding their objections back through the legislature and trying to dismantle that. And so one of the lessons for this is there's a basic thing. Plan in the large. I think it's really important for you to have a clear vision about where you're going. I would advertise you could put more in terms of the future of the state rather than just sustainability of something. What is it really going to be done? But actually, the implementation of these things absolutely require time to engage the constituencies within your system. The main lesson, which is a strong collective bargaining agreement, if you run ahead of where you are and your faculty groups who are really going to be the key to it, you will have serious problems. So, but I think if I just listen to where you're going, you've got a whole set of really great things that you're doing and opportunities that need to be built on. The only thing you probably need to realize is that you probably need to up the antes about another 50% in the urgency. And I just say this in this way. You have no more money. You're at the high end of cost of comparative purposes. You really need to reduce the cost and still offer quality programs. And you've got the framework around here to work on some of the things that Yasmin and others described. And it will take a long time to make sure all the constituencies are engaged in doing this. These are not overnight, but I'm going to say this not related to Vermont, but this is the truth, that institutions that used to be a full-service institution, that is to say, we're going to have an undergraduate programs and a few master's degree programs and things like that, will no longer be that way. Well, they'll be, however, is a delivery point with a few areas of expertise, but they will be a site which essentially buys in content from other parts of the system to make sure that their students have access to those opportunities. And that is an ugly picture, for a number of people, because it's going to be a process of change, but the idea of a full-service operation in each thing. So that's just a kind of a national picture on the thing, and it's probably more stark than people realize. That if you look at getting to the 60% in Vermont and what it would take, you can't get from here to there at your current cost per student. Okay? It's impossible. Neither students nor the state are going to have the money. But how do you do that? Well, you do that working on the thing that Yasmin's talking about. You work with much more effectively with a vehicle like the Community College of Vermont. And now what I'm going to say now will probably be unpopular, but I'd be honest with you. There is no silver bullet on international students, private fundraising, or getting students from another state. I'm working with every other state in New England, which is in fact eager to get every student from Vermont. The solution in Connecticut is to steal students from everybody else to fill an enrollment gap in the institutions from them. I've spent my life in the last 10 years working in every country from which you would recruit students. I'm involved in the national strategy of Ireland, where Irish institutions are desperate to recruit in Asian markets. I've done the review of Japan, and I just did a project in Australia, which in fact lived on international students and is finding that market go down the tube. International students the market is extremely competitive, and the Asian market tends to be elitist to the extreme. So that doesn't mean that international students are not important, but panaceas are not there. So maybe to sum it up, the thing is, I think you are doing more exciting things than you can imagine. It's more important than probably you imagine. If you really put the needs of Vermont on the table, and the fact that you've got a reasonable community here, you've got good places that really can have a niche, but having them work and play together to make it much more than a sum of individual pieces. The other thing is, I just underscore the idea that if you want to come out of this meeting, Chip, in a way, I think the trick is to have a clear sense of vision, but also a set of steps of reasonable lines of work that are going to take time, because I think the faster things are done on some of these things, the more you will disengage some of your key constituents and nothing will happen. For example, if you could say you could share, it ought to be possible for any student at any one of your locations to access capabilities from another campus. But what 2 or 3 areas would be most logical for you to work on, and how do you engage faculty and others in the process of designing that? You may already be doing it. That's extremely hard to do, and it will require the support. Goes back to the foundation comments. Each one of your institutions is living on tuition revenue. They're not living on state appropriations. So every student is critical to them. The incentives to work and play together are near zero, if not minus. If you don't put money in the middle to, have as a catalyst for them to working together, it won't work. So that's probably more than you wanted to know.
It's fantastic. It's great. We ought to give Michael a chance to say a few things, but then I also, what I wanted to get out of you though is like, okay, Penn State, Maine, or
Michael, just answer that.
Well, I can say amen, and we could all take a break. James speaks with authority. I was probably a week into a doctoral program when I found the mother lode of Ames McGinnis scholarship, and I've been a disciple ever since. But maybe to build on what Ames has said. So first of all, I would just compliment you on where you are, because I think you're in a very good situation right now. You've got this committee. I know you've been working on a strategic inquiry process. You've got, I think, a great set of institutional leaders. I think you have institutions and people that are smart and flexible and nimble and resourceful, and you live and work close enough together that you have the ability to live and work closely together. So I think you've got a lot of assets here moving forward. I think I would say, when it comes to the future of what I'll call system structure, I would say be careful not to confuse your vision for systemness with a need for structural change or the notion of structure. I think the work that Elaine has done, some of the conversations we've had have talked about what I would call macro structures. We're talking about coordination versus governance. We're talking about different systems of institutions, either in comprehensive or segment or other fashions. Ames probably makes a lot of good consulting arrangements by people who have spent all of their capital on system change and have never gotten to systemness or to and so I think I would probably challenge you in terms that Ames has already spoken. Step back and say, okay, what are we about here? And I think you've been very clear about your need to serve students and this notion to reduce friction in the system. So I think from your bigger ideas and your strategic inquiry process, you've got some very good statements of how you want to make a system work better for students. To build upon what Ames has said, which I think is evident in everything you said, I think on all of your slides you had for the benefit of Vermont as a footer, right? So I know that you've thought about that. I would say put that back into the process as well and say, okay, so how does this also relate to where we need to be as a state in terms of workforce, in terms of the overall future and provision of higher education in the state, in terms of driving our economy, et cetera, et cetera.
And every region of the state, if I just put
and if you could make it more specific too, you're right, the needs of specific regions, I think you'd be good too. So back to the point of systemness versus structure. I think in our conversation and what I've heard is that I would say I don't know that you need to be Penn State. That's a wholly different arrangement for a wholly different place with a wholly different history. I think what you have the opportunity to succeed as is a variation of what you already are, which is a well-integrated, comprehensive system of higher education, where you're offering across multiple institutions, multiple types of degrees, and finding ways to bring it together in as effective and high-impact fashion as you possibly can. So, and to the point of resources, if you have, whatever resources you have to dedicate to this process, I wouldn't dedicate them to changing that system. I would dedicate them to further, per Ames's comments, in finding a way to engage your key stakeholders. So build upon the process that you've had in your strategic inquiry and say, okay, now how do we move this to action? And how do we build sort of integrated teams across institutions and functional areas where you can now perhaps bring some resources to bear to actually get a work plan and a time frame, I think to Martha's question here, to identify, maybe beginning with low-hanging fruit to slightly ambitious, what you can do in whatever, defined length of time you might do. And focus on that notion of systemness for the benefit of the state and for the institution. To Ames' point, I think, the notion of being a learner-centered system and figuring out how you can integrate these things to the benefit of the learner. So to Ames's point of being able to provide greater sets of options and opportunities, of choice sets, if you will, to students in every element of the state and every area of the state, using perhaps your campus as a base. But for the student who is not mobile, creating maximum opportunities to give them the broadest choice set across your excellent and diverse institutions as you possibly can. So does that answer, is that helpful?
I think what it would be interesting to do would be to start getting the committee and board members to engage in questions and dialogue back and forth.
Just one point to amplify, and it kind of answers the options 1, 2, 3 issue. I think it's really important to understand how important play, and this is kind of an old-fashioned idea, but that students actually learn at a location. They don't learn, most of them, up in the air somewhere. That's reflected, on the sites that you have on the community college, but they actually learn at places that are very different, whether it's Castleton or Johnson. And I think at any one point in time, it's really important to understand how important those places are. From that point of view, I have to be a big advocate of why accreditation should not just be lumped all together, because I think the accreditation process asks the question, at this place or for this mission, does it make sense? And that will be different. So I would take off the table, let's mush it all together in accreditation. What it also ups the ante for is the quality of student services and support and a core faculty that really pays attention to student learning at those places. The other thing is that I think increasingly you'll have students, and illustrated by what Yasmin's saying, really picking up pieces from multiple points. And the question is, will we increasingly provide coherence for that learning experience? I think you're going to find ways to talk about what was also talked about in student aid, for example, will increasingly not be student specific. It will be around a student's essentially registration or accumulation of the credit. So, but the reason I want to emphasize the accreditation thing, I think Michael and I would say, don't mush it all together. Recognize that this ought to be a system of good, outstanding places that are different, that have a synergy to bring together. That's why we argue for 3 more than, is that a?
I think that's exactly right. I think I'm a big proponent of what an accreditation process does for an institution, and to Ames' point, understanding what it is they do and how well they do it and why and for whom. And again, if you had endless resources, I still wouldn't spend my time and energy and money on that process, because I wouldn't ultimately save you any money, and you lose that element. And from the standpoint of Title IV eligibility and all sorts of different things, it just wouldn't be, I think, the way to go.
I can't resist asking a question that I shouldn't ask. So Karen and Craig, you're going to have to start asking questions here in the dialogue. But isn't that what Maine's thinking about trying to do? And I mean, to me, I don't get it, but I mean, isn't that what they're?
But I think they're raising an important point. Maybe to shift the burden off Maine, to say we're also working with Nancy Zimper,
New York,
same kind of
SUNY.
one of the things that SUNY is doing is, in fact, I think they're trying to work on being the single Title IV entity so that students do not have to go through a repeated process of registering and being eligible for Title IV. So Maine is trying to do, will probably end up doing that around a set of majors that are most frequent. Probably around business and a set of other areas. Again, that maximum. If you're doing that, you absolutely need to do it with teams of faculty. That's why I emphasize the process of change. And I don't think it will involve Orono or the University of Southern Maine. I think it will probably more likely involve the other campuses. But at least they're putting it on the table as something because they can't do things the way they've been doing them, just like you are.
That's the main message. You can't keep doing it the way you do it.
Dead silent.
I'll make a comment. I am kind of encouraged to hear both of you say that you feel like we're kind of on the right track and we just kind of need to step it up a bit. And to me, I mean, I'm a pretty straightforward, black and white kind of person, surprise. And, you know, I see those opportunities that were listed on those slides earlier, and so in my mind, okay, so we prioritize them and we make a commitment and we move on. But that's, I mean, I know that's very real, simplistic, but it, you know, I think it's encouraging to think that maybe we don't need to take ourselves apart and put us back together again, that maybe we can just kind of tweak here and there and move forward.
Well, first of all, I think anybody who's changing systems by right, you know, sharp right and left turns are deceiving themselves. That's not the way higher ed changes. I'll tell you what and so what I'm going to be wrong about here, and you could just pick on me. One thing I've just observed in what you do is kind of data-free. There's nothing there about the needs of Vermont, the number of people, the bodies, or anything like that. There's nothing there about the business plan about how you get from here to there. There are a set of outline of processes, but to what end is not really clear. I think that could help you. I mean, on this plan forward, where do you want to be? You know, if Yasmin's working on the 60%, I mean, how many, I could probably tell you your gap is you're probably around 40% now. Is that?
Yeah, 42-ish. We're on track to get all 52. I'm sorry, 48.
48, yeah.
Yeah, 48. Sorry, I was thinking graduation.
So,
But don't forget on this 60%, and I always think it's important to do it, it's 60% of the Vermont population needs to have a post-secondary credential. It doesn't mean 60% need a bachelor's degree.
No,
So there's a real difference there in terms of when you sort of look at the cost to get us to where we're going to end up.
Yeah, and also you can do it by in-migration. So not only would you can do a variety of things, but
that's why we're going to legalize it.
The truth is, but what if you said, in fact, that you've almost maxed out on the need for the baccalaureate level? What you're really lacking is at the associate degree and certificate level. You don't have any more state money, so why don't we take the state money and allocate it where it's really needed?
Amen.
That would today. I mean, if there isn't any money, then who's going to pay for that? I mean, that's the other thing is just having an idea of, you know, basic indicators that you really need, and what share I think you would have a really strong case that you are the key to serving Vermont citizens.
I think we do. We try to make that. We you know, what I always like to say, and you heard me say it this morning already, I didn't finish it though, but you know, Vermont has more post-secondary institutions per capita than any other state in the country. But I didn't say this morning. But the Vermont State Colleges educate more Vermonters than all the other colleges and universities in the state put together.
Yeah,
we confer, even if you look at MD degrees.
Right.
You know, so you go associates right up.
Right.
We confer almost twice as many degrees to Vermonters. This any other institution. So I mean, there aren't too many that you know what I'm saying there, but I mean, in other words, we are the people's university of the state of Vermont. And
We have a model which Jasmine do on our website, which you can take Vermont and say, what do you have to move in order to get to the 60%? And most of the improvement, I'll put it this way, you could probably improve the completion rates at your colleges and move fractionally. But the real issue is probably going to be with Community College Vermont, and what you do at an associate and certificate level. And again, you're going to be the major capacity. But you all as a board really need to have that, because then that is the why behind your whole summary.
So the flip side of Bill Haynes, I have to say, I know this is so much fun for me. I just love this. But I'm not making the argument that we shouldn't aspire to have more people have bachelor's degrees. And I think a lot of people that get a credential or get an associate's degree at some point are going to want to get to the next level up. Because from an individual's perspective, their economic prospects on average are significantly enhanced by having that. So if we got the state's needs, and we have the individual Vermonters' needs, and we got to serve them both.
Okay, then the other goes back to Church's point. You are the governing board for each of these institutions, and you have to realize that they've got to survive, and they will. Their economic survival depends upon serving more than Vermont.
Yes.
So you have a dual responsibility in that way. So
yeah, and we do.
So
And you know, I mean, compared, I have a fairly charitable view about bringing in out-of-state students, whether it's the university or Linden State College. I mean, if there's no more money coming from the state and you got pretty high tuition, I mean, if somebody will pay that out-of-state tuition, it helps us afford the financial aid for Vermont students to come to one of ours or the university. So, and there is some diversity advantage there too.
So anyway, we're not.
Yeah, we're getting off.
Karen, and then Jim and Craig.
I have a question that both of you gentlemen, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. I attended the meeting in Boston, and I think you were both at that meeting.
Right.
And Tim German was kind enough to invite me to the legislators' meeting. And what struck me about that is how broke everybody is and how we all have the same issues. And as I looked around the room, I wondered, now we have programs that we share, or that we have nice agreements with one another. And so far, those agreements are really based upon each state not offering a particular program and other states being able to offer that to their constituencies based on not having one. What if, because we're all broke, what if we viewed one another as partners? And what if, for example, and I'm just throwing this out, I'm sure there are other states that think they have great ag programs, but what if for those very expensive programs that are financial losers almost across the board, that we decide that regionally we're going to have centers, so that, for example, everyone from New England who wants to take advantage of an ag program, look at the ag program here in Vermont. And I'm just throwing that out there. I'm assuming that ours is going to be the best one, or the pinnacle, or have the, and likewise that there are other programs in other states that maybe we might want to drop a very expensive program that we offer at the VSC and send our students there. Might that be something that would be generally beneficial to everyone? And what are the prospects of doing that?
Well, to answer your two last questions in order, I think, obviously I come out with a regional perspective, so I'll say yes, I think that's beneficial. The prospects for doing it are, can be a little bit challenging, because there you have, the possibilities for some people winning and some people losing. So you have to, I think, have strong leadership and support and some to Dame's point, some really good data to help buttress the argument. And doing it across borders and across states can be challenging. I would say you've had some good conversation here about efficiency across institutions, and I would say don't limit yourself to public institutions, because you've referenced Vermont independent institutions, all of whom are challenged with similar issues that you're facing. And so I would say see if there are opportunities across program provision that you could actually bridge the public and independent divide. We looked at a model in the UK called, it's called SIVS. It sounds like a disease. It's called Strategically Important But Vulnerable Subjects, where they were looking at high per student cost programs. And they tend to be largely sort of STEM-based programs or rare languages, and there are other programs. But essentially, costs of operation are high, enrollment is low. And, they've done some. We had hoped they'd have more, sort of, again, silver bullet solutions where they just solve these problems. It didn't necessarily prove to be the case, but we did find places where, by working across areas of the UK, they were able to either consolidate program offering. That was probably more of the exception, but they were able to build joint programs and outreach and pipeline strategies to then drive up the enrollment. So again, the per student cost decreases. But I think if you were to think maybe in the context of system and or state, what are some of our strategically important but vulnerable subjects? So presumably STEM, right? Every state wants STEM graduates. Could you work with a Norwich and with other institutions to say, could we, all of 5 colleges in Massachusetts, could we do some joint program provision? I would be optimistic about that being a logical next step, perhaps even more realistic than the cross-border, though I'm supportive of cross-border, and it's something that we're trying to think about a fair amount. Is that helpful?
Have you been promoting that already? Excuse me. Have you been promoting that notion already that, for example, and I hate to pound on it, but it's a clear prospect. The ag program, for example. Everybody thinks of cows and milk and ice cream when they think of Vermont and cheese. So that sort of thing, that be where everyone from New England would go. That be the program.
Yeah, we're trying to build a survey right now that would, in fact, assess either at the system and or institutional level where we can identify SIVs. So we're hopeful that we'll have a little bit more data on that. But that's
maybe just a couple of things about that. Maybe this relates a little bit to Dan's point about decentralizing things. What happens in a system, and there are a number of them around that I'm not thinking of Vermont, where you have each institution having to make decisions about what's sustainable, is that they may well make a decision that they no longer continue a low enrollment program for their own reasons. But there are a number of people who really need that program. They simply are small numbers of students. And I think you need to think in Vermont about how to identify those, that in fact from an individual institutional economy thing, we just can't keep that going. But if we were to do it with several of us, we actually could continue that opportunity at our campus. In fact, we could get the enrollment numbers up and make it economical. I think the other point is, in fact, I think the issue is, in fact, just the reverse of what you described. What's more important today is the connection of higher education with the regions in which it's located. And this is a Maine bias, but Maine agriculture is a little bit different. And I know you have lots of potatoes in Vermont, and lobsters that live in the mountains and things. So it's not, Maine is actually because its agriculture is connected to cooperative extension and like that, it's probably one of the more embedded in each state culture. But you will have the same issue of high need but low number programs that need to be maintained. And you need to think across your colleges of how you maintain some good things. It may be in the arts and humanities, for example, that you could not justify it at this place, but let's please not phase it out. How can we really make it possible to be done? So I really please think of, I don't know whether Maine thinks, whether Vermont thinks about regions, although Church mentioned that the place where he lives is not really in Vermont.
That's true, it's close though.
It's close.
Right. Dan, did you have something specific to Karen's question?
Well, I think Ames covered it pretty well. I was just sort of, I wanted to be responsive to that, the idea of regionalization and to, again, make sure we're informing a conversation based on what we identify as state needs. The danger for a regionalized conversation, if you start thinking about the things that we're teaching and the things that we do that are tied to the economy of the state. So I have a pretty vibrant program in software engineering, right? If we were to be very disciplined about our approach to regionalization, there's not much reason for us to do that as opposed to letting somebody in Massachusetts or Boston, where there's a more of a comprehensive scaled opportunity to do that. So we need, I think we need, the most important word in my view of this board reflection is the word comprehensive, and that needs to be informed by the needs of the state. So as a system of 5 public colleges, how are we presenting a comprehensive set of programs that reinforce the economy and the needs of the state? So it's not that I need to do everything at Vermont Technical College, or that Joyce needs to do everything at the Community College of Vermont, or that the team from Castleton needs to do everything at Castleton, but that across the system of 5 colleges, we're making sure that the regions and state objectives are being met. I also, I do think, Joyce, you said this at the first meeting of this committee. You said something about thinking differently about how we support, how we think about the financial pictures of each of the individual institutions. It begins to be a reflection of that recognition of what are crucial but small, potentially small enrollment programs. If we were to solely, and we were tuition and enrollment driven, so we have to consider what students want to study.
Right.
But if we were to let that be the sole diviner of what we're going to teach, our collective programs will look very, very different than they might if we were to pull it from a mission that's consistent with the objective and the economic needs of the state. Comprehensive and serving for the benefit of Vermont, I think are 2 really, really important themes for this board to keep. I hope we'll keep in mind.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a couple sorts of thoughts. I'm encouraged to hear that we're more or less on the right track. It is comforting, I guess, to hear that there's no more money. At least we're all in it together.
He's a legislator.
Don't tell anybody that.
Try. But I think this is the first time I've heard the term faculty teams used, which is maybe just because I haven't had my ears open, but it seems to me if we're going to be comprehensive and meet students' needs and be not too narrowly focused, that student teams are very, very important, and having more discussion around that might be very helpful. Then I have some other thoughts that are not necessarily collinear, so just bear with me. With regards to meeting the state's needs, I've been struck for a couple of years that I think many of our workforce development programs, independent of the state colleges, are kind of spot treatment. We go from, we tend to head towards the immediate need of this industry or that industry, which those programs serve a purpose, but they're certainly not systemic. And I think what we would like to do, in addition to offering liberal arts and education, is offering workforce development in a way that is in fact systemic. It's not just a little bit one week, exaggerating, being sarcastic, but veers from one thing to another year by year or something. We don't quite do that, but you understand where I'm going, I think. That, and when you're talking about to what extent we use data or don't, I think I find from my perspective that while the Department of Labor may know more about which areas of the state need which jobs at which times and which are fairly consistent in which what come and go. Collectively, very few of us know a whole lot about that. And it occurs to me that I haven't heard a discussion at board level about what we do that would indicate that that information is out there and that somehow we're working with it. And I wouldn't want us to get so focused on one industry or another that we lose track of student education. But it seems to me that there are things out there that we could make good use of, I think. And then lastly, if I can remember it, lose my train of thought. That's what you get from me to go linear. I mean, not go linear. I also think, and I appreciate to hear that students learn in places, because we do learn in places, whoever we are. And I think we need to not, I mean, we will come up with a much more integrated web presence that is very helpful for students. But students do learn in places. All of us learn in places. And I was encouraged to hear that phrase used in a sentence.
Jim, let me try to respond to that, just as we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't thought of this till this morning when Ames mentioned he got here before Michael got here. And, you know, you said something like, Ames, that, okay, you know, I mean, this is definitely aspirational vision. How you make it happen, I don't know. But that if we're a system of 5 distinct institutions, someday it would be nice that students at whatever college or university they're at within our system should be able to actually access, without leaving their institution, programs that are offered at another one of ours. I mean, I hadn't really thought of that before. I'm thinking it would be great if a student at Castleton could spend a semester at Linden or vice versa, but to actually say, no, if you're a student at Johnson, you know, you can actually take the atmospheric sciences program at Linden while you're on Johnson. How is that even possible? What are you talking about there?
So I want to give you an idealized picture, and then that's why I put the emphasis on picking selected areas and understanding the work that it needs to be done with faculty to make anything like that work.
Right. Yes.
Because the heart of the matter is really, you know, those of you who know all about distance delivery and like that, the key to this is probably not the technology to offer content, it's really the quality of the student services and the place where you connect. I mean, that must have a lot to do with the community college of Vermont. So in some ways, it's enhancing the ability of institutions to connect student services to get students through something like that. But what is new is, in fact, obtaining content from other places. And I think thinking through how that might be done in the system in areas that where you really, and I don't want to go beyond that because I think it requires a team of people to really work through how that might work. For example, there was a stereotype view is that this place can do gen ed and we'll just get a major in. Well, most gen ed is in fact systemically related to whether you're majoring in business or in whatever it may be. So how you have the capability of, for example, at Castleton, to in fact have a program which is offered somewhere else required much more synchronization of faculty capability. I just think you ought to think about that. Students are not as mobile as people imagine. They live in a place, they're likely to have a significant other in that place, they're likely to work, and they won't pair across Vermont from one place to another. And if they are not getting it from the Vermont State Colleges, they will be getting it from somebody else at a lower cost than probably going to your institution, and then coming back to you and saying, well, I want to accept these credits. So why don't you be an expert in how you really do that and have each of your campuses be a premium learning site, not only for the content delivered by the resident faculty, but actually drawn on from multiple places within the system.
Which to some extent would have been part of the original vision behind the Penn State model, was that they created these other campuses so that they could offer Penn State degrees. Now they've become, to some extent, their own institutions, and they've had, individual degree offerings, but the original vision was rather than, creating a whole new program at a whole new place, let's take what we already have within the university and take it to a new location. But I think Dame's point, you're going to offer every program. You have to think really critically, again, based on needs of regions, what those might be and what sort of available programs within the system could be part of that mix.
And then working out the economics of the situation where each institution is relying upon enrollment and how you share revenue and all those things. I just think you ought to set a goal that in fact something like this can work, Jeb, and then engage people in saying how might it work and what are the practical barriers and the things that you have to do to work it through.
That's great.
Craig.
I am that student who is tied down to a certain area and where I work and my spouse, and the idea of driving only 45 minutes to Castleton is much more appealing than 2 hours and 15 minutes to UVM. So, if Castleton is able to move ahead, that would just be awesome for me. And I'm sure other Vermonters in the part of the state that people forget about would feel the same way. What I'm curious about, and I don't know if you have any information or data, since Plymouth moved to university status, how has that had an impact on Keene and Granite?
Can I just
Hampshire, yeah.
now let me go back to my first statement. That, Michael and I have discussed the Castleton issue, and I should be horrible to reveal the fact that we think that you ought to just say that's not a bad idea and move ahead with it. I think you ought to get over that fixation. Whether yes or no, that's a bad thing to reveal to you. And there are reasons for that that probably go beyond analyzing all the data. But having said that, let me just tell you the truth, that change to university status has had marginal influence on increase in enrollment, recruitment of international students, or a set of other things like that. It has meant a lot to the institutions in terms of their internal culture and the pride of the communities. But you shouldn't suddenly see this having an impact. If you look at the Massachusetts institutions that had university status in 2010 to today, their enrollments have gone down, if anything. They haven't increased at the graduate level. I'll just reveal this right off the bat. One of the impacts is that if you don't watch out, is in fact you will creep into a cost model that you simply cannot afford. Realize the money you have is the money you have, okay? So every new program you have is taken away from another program. Students cannot get more debt than an average of 38, the levels at which debt is now. So that is the major downside. But I can give you other examples. For example, the colleges in West Virginia that are roughly comparable, West Liberty and Shepherd, and a move from college to university status. It meant a lot to those institutions and to the communities in which they're located. They have not changed their profile significantly. They haven't moved up the food chain, which everybody wants, which is the costly development of doctoral programs, and expanded their graduate programs because, frankly, they draw attention away from their primary mission of undergraduate education. The argument, oh, well, these are going to enhance undergraduate education, frankly, I don't think sells. So, the issue with Plymouth is, I think, double the size of Castleton right now. And most of the institutions in Massachusetts are 2 to 3 times the size of Castleton. The ones that I mentioned in West Virginia are closer. They're right around 2 to 3. But our feeling is, given the momentum of this and the importance of the institution and the community, that's one thing. But the important thing is just to be very realistic about the outcomes. It's not a miraculous kind of change that's suddenly going to happen.
But do you know if it has had a negative impact on the other schools in the system?
No, I wouldn't say it's had a negative impact. Where it will have a negative impact if it promotes mission creep But let me just describe this. If anybody thinks that there's a perception on boards like this that if that a change from, say, college to university status is something that, oh, well, we can control that. What happens is that that institutions, believe it or not, are really driven by faculties and faculty cultures. And as soon as you change to say we're now a university, that's worth many hours of thinking we are now a university, and what does that mean? Which means we've got to rethink what faculty work is, what percentage of our time is devoted to research. Other universities have lower faculty teaching loads than ours, and it's more important that we have more time to teach within our discipline. Wouldn't it be nice other universities have more graduate programs that we don't have? And my experience is that that's almost beyond administrator control. It's a matter of culture and perception. And I could give you examples from Russia to Ireland to India to every country I've worked in, including every state in the USA. That's just in the water. So as a board, you need to be really clear about what the mission of the institution is, no matter what its name may be. And your institution's overwhelming strength happens to be in undergraduate education and in a few selected master's degree programs that are relevant to Vermont. And just keep clearly focused on that without regard to the name. Does that make sense? I don't know whether that helps Castleton, but I don't.
Yeah, so I think all good thoughts from Ames, and I think maybe to answer your question relative to what was the outcome or the implications for New Hampshire institutions. So a slightly different system. They obviously have a land grant plus now a university plus a state liberal arts plus, well, that's essentially they don't have community college, so a slightly different system. But Keene has always been very focused on its public liberal arts personality. It's a member of COPLAC, which is the Association Council of Public Liberal Arts Colleges. It's wanted the college appellation to sort of reaffirm its unique identity in that regard. Plymouth obviously had grown and wanted to reflect its sort of institutional trajectory and growth in graduate programs, not unlike Castleton, though to Ames' point, it is a larger institution. So I think it's worked out fine there. The process for change in New Hampshire also requires legislative approval, so it's a little bit more of a process. But I think, in my conversations with New Hampshire people, it's worked out just fine. Plymouth has enrollment pressures now. So to Ames' point, I think, the best data we have suggests that, that it doesn't have a substantial impact on enrollment. To that point, I would suggest, to get a little bit off track here, if I were to say what could be a really good use of shared resources given where the system is at, and I think it was noted in one of the slides here, but I would say, is there a way that you could pull resources and expertise to really even perhaps get some sort of top quality consulting help here to think about the enrollment future of the institutions in the system? Because I think it is such a competitive world out there, and you are competing against state universities that have that consulting expertise and that have been able to get the talent to really drive that. And I would say if there were a way that you could work together to come up with a real strategic plan and bring in some national experts with some really powerful data and some real market data and market and branding expertise, I would really suggest you think about that possibility, because I think where enrollments are generally in our region and public institutions specifically, that might be an opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree. It just it's beyond what what we do in my organization. So I would.
And there are lots of people out there who will give you those services. You just need to probably.
But also doing it as a system too would be good.
I think so, and there have been some good examples. I think Massachusetts actually at the system level has done this effectively, doing what a single institution just couldn't afford. They couldn't go to a Noel Levitz or a McGuire Associates or whoever the other vendors are out there who really bring some expertise to that.
That's great. I'd love to get
absolutely
some pointers.
Gladly.
I want to ask a question that, going back to both of your views that we should take off the table the option of a single accreditation. So that leaves us option 2 and 3, that both leave the accreditations with the individual colleges. One involves an overall change for the system, and the other involves leaving it just the way it is. And
Could I do a modification of my answer to that? I want you to finish your question, and then I'll...
Okay, I thought you were pretty clear on take the single accreditation off the table. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, let me give you I think you've got a mixed alternative. I would really stress each institution being accredited. But you can have it, I suspect the Community College of Vermont as a system operation is accredited as a single institution with multiple delivery sites. I think, let me pick on Maine as an example. I think Maine may end up in a situation in which they have accreditation of individual units, but that they have a statewide entity which in fact is accredited to deliver in multiple sites. So that you have within the Vermont State Colleges a vehicle which is accredited, is accredited to in fact deliver programs in multiple sites. So it isn't an either or, but I wouldn't accredit the whole thing as one entity. I'll pick on State University of New York, maybe that's even. If you look at, Nancy Zephyr has emphasized open SUNY, and this has also both union and accreditation issues in New York. But you'll have a campus like Adirondack Community College, which has right next to it a unit. What's the unit within SUNY that does distance learning? Empire. You'll have a unit of that right next to Empire State. What Nancy really wanted to make possible is that at Adirondack Community College, students could go to that institution and get programs that in fact were offered by Buffalo, Albany, from throughout the system, and to use Open SUNY as the vehicle to deliver that. So in fact, you have a campus which in fact has opportunities offered by multiple institutions from throughout SUNY. So Adirondack Community College has programs offered by its own faculty, but has available to it programs offered throughout. Well, that, what's the name of the institution?
Empire.
Yeah, Empire is accredited as a single unit. Okay, so I think one of the things you may want to think about is maintaining accreditation of your units, but also having a vehicle which is accredited to deliver in multiple places. You have sort of a college within a system for that purpose. Now, you could give me chapter and verse. In SUNY, there are issues related to state regulation. The State Education Department has difficulty approving those programs, and there are collective bargaining issues.
I mean, that's one of the things I think about with some of these ones that, I mean, it'll take years to work through those issues.
But just realize if you don't work...
I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm not. But I would say, like on the Open SUNY, I mean, would it be possible to say, look, within the system, of course, they're much bigger than we are, so we have an advantage to say, well, some of these ones that we want to be statewide, let's offer it through one of ours that are already accredited. You know? I mean,
that's why I think both Michael and I are really clear. Make clear what you want, the what, okay? And then engage the people within the system to answer the how, rather than picking it up out of somewhere else. And people here, you've got a lot of bright people. They'll figure out a way, and it might be the alternative you talked about.
So I'm going to go back to
which I think is partially an answer to your question.
Well, it added another dimension. I mean, clearly, what you suggested is that there's a hybrid possible as well. So but if you are left with option 2, which which leaves the accreditation where it is, but adopts a new system name in a university status for everybody, or even with your hybrid suggestion of within that accrediting the central system for purposes of delivery at multiple sites for understood. My question is on the confusion factor. Whether you go that direction or you stay and we say VSC, Vermont State Colleges and University. The other option may be being Vermont State University, being option two.
How about Vermont higher education system?
Well, that's a possibility. But the question is, does that, because some of the stakeholders out there have suggested that anything that would confuse in the public's mind what we are offering, whether it is the system of public higher education, that by the way doesn't include the University of Vermont, or a Vermont State University that is not the University of Vermont. My question is, however we ultimately make a decision, from your experiences, how is the confusion factor a legitimate argument for our decision making? And if we make it, how long does that confusion usually last in the students' minds in Vermont who are trying to get into the schools or from elsewhere?
Michael?
Well, option 2 seems to me like the most confusably possible alternative. I don't know that I used that phrase, but if you think of, if you think of institutional name change and system name change, that combines both of them. Option 3, you have an institution changing its status, not so much its name as its status from college to university, because Castleton State would continue. And then you have the alternative, maybe some variation to the system entity. But that, as far as students are concerned, is not, in my mind, particularly consequential, because they're going to be looking at institutions, not systems.
I totally agree with Michael.
Option 2, you could potentially change the name of all constituent institutions as well as the system. So you throw every variable sort of into flux, and I don't know what would be gained by that beyond, in addition to the fact that I think, again, the benefit of being a comprehensive system of diverse and differentiated institutions is not compatible with option 2. I think that's where you are and where you stand to profit and benefit and continue to prosper. I don't know.
Can I push that though, just because I think, everybody knows that's what I agree with.
You're right, of course.
But I think one of the things that you said, Jerry, is that I'm curious, is that conceivably, for the benefit of the students, having a degree from Vermont State University, Linden, I'm just picking one, would be more beneficial or of value to the student than having a degree from Linden State College. Is that what do you think about that?
I just think that doesn't matter. It wouldn't worth the pain of the change.
I'd focus on the content of what you're offering. I think your degree speaks for itself insofar as it's a high quality degree. Your institution speaks for itself insofar as it's a high quality institution. I think, you might hear something different from employers. It's certainly a question you could raise with Vermont employers. Do you look more favorably upon a student with a university versus a college degree? My guess is that they're more focused on their skills and what they know than that single word. I don't know.
I spent my first job, just to give you an example, one of the biggest battles right now relates to the University of Southern Maine, and I think back that I staffed the task force that put together Gorham State College, the University of Maine in Portland, and all the lessons from that. One is that symbols make a great deal of difference in cultures, and renaming things. I'm talking about making, Castleton really, Vermont State University at Castleton, is something if we made a list of things to absolutely avoid to you all, is please put that high on the list. You know, that just is not what you want to do. I think it's much better to have an image of a collage. When somebody looks at your website, they really see very different places with a synergy. You can have a collage visually of all the, logos, but then an image that really says of how they fit together, almost like a puzzle, rather than to paint them all gray and have their little subheading of their locations. Is that I'm sorry, I know it's contrary to what you think, but.
No,
it isn't.
It's perfectly in line with what he thinks. It's contrary to what I think, but that's all right.
Yeah, so, presuming that resources are finite, by which I mean both finances and attention and institutional energy and goodwill, whatever you throw into the resource basket, assuming that resource is finite, I would spend my resources more on your system vision and your ability to serve the state than I would structural change and or large-scale branding change.
Yeah,
I think.
And don't, partly, to be honest, on when you have momentum in a place like Castleton, spending your time saying no is time could much better be energy be spent about how you take advantage of that and make something really work. And that's the kind of thing, you just have a limited amount of time as a board. And you have a tremendous agenda of your things you're working on and saying which one of these things you're going to get done at the end of the year and in 2 or 3 years and which ones are going to take 3 or 4 years and that kind of thing. It's going to be much better.
And I would say, insofar as you're inclined to make changes, I think the key question to ask is how do we use these opportunities to move institutions and system forward? Again, beyond names and appellations and stationery. How do we use this as an opportunity to move ourselves forward in a number of different ways, including, in terms of how well the state and its decision makers and its employers know we are suited to meet the needs of the state.
Chairperson.
I told myself, shut up and don't ask questions, but I look at these meetings that we have, and probably each meeting we have with our administrators, other people coming, it's about $5,000 for this meeting, if I add it all up. And I'm thinking to myself, what as a trustee should I be spending my time on? And it seems like we're going round and round on a name, on a system that we need to energize. We've got, in my opinion, a good system, but we need to energize it. And we have one school that wants to call itself a university. I don't think that's going to really change the world. I truly don't think it's going to change the world. But I spent 2 days in the Castleton-Rutland community. Those people are so excited about doing something like that. And I see that perhaps energizing the other schools. I used to be a first grade teacher, and the first day I taught, I didn't know which book to pull off the shelf. And I had a wonderful principal, and she said, just watch me a little while. And I had 3 or 4 students that were ready to read chapter books. I had a whole group of students that really weren't. But I said, well, do I hold all of those students back? Or the 2 or 3 students back so everybody is together? And I was told, no, let the students go, let them energize everyone else. And I guess I see this discussion doing exactly that. And we should be spending our time on how are we going to improve what we've got, how are we going to change it, and how are we going to listen to a chancellor who has got so many great ideas, and he really wants to move. We've got 4 or 5 presidents that we just gave them 2 more years on a contract. They've got great ideas, and I have no reason not to listen to them, and I hear you folks, I think, saying pretty much the same thing.
Do it.
Yeah, let me give you one, this goes back, I think, to a question that Church raised, and I often say to boards that you only, I don't know how many hours, but you probably only have about 100 hours. There's a finite number of time you have as a board.
Right.
And I think you need to balance, you need to be a effective trustee of each institution. And that will be very different across your institutions. You know, the enthusiasm you want to encourage ought to be a different enthusiasm around a different goal at each one of your places.
Absolutely.
The other thing is that I think you really need a set of really clear goals for the system that go back to this Future of Vermont issue. And I would say at least if you take your time on a board, you want to divide it up, that you're looking at what you're doing to advance the system, a synergy of the system to serve, that system goal. Secondly, the time you're devoting to give really serious attention to each of your individual institutions. I don't mean just to show and tell. You want to have an opportunity to sit down with your presidents and this is your mission, what do you know, what's in the way? How can we support you? And then you have a set of activities that are essentially ministerial, which you in fact need to shift to a consent agenda. What happens is that boards spend most of their time on the third item. And then they spend time actually on listening to the most active president, and the agenda is simply an institutional agenda. And so if you've been spending your time on what to do with Castleton, that's eating up your attention which you should be giving to the other places.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I couldn't agree with you.
And then you may be spending zero time on how the system connects with some broader goals. I think you're doing a lot of good system things, but the why you're doing them isn't absolutely clear. Okay. So then so look back over your time as a board member and where have you really spent your time. You'll be much more credible if you're leading on the substance rather than on the mechanics.
We listen to Dan a lot, too.
Yeah, it's...
I'm going to get back.
Poor Dan.
So I didn't know, Mr. Chairman, we wanted to try to get through question 1 and 2 in order. We sort of conflated them a little bit now, and that's okay. I don't know, there's a question. It's 2:35. Does anybody need a short break and then come back and... No? Okay.
Nobody wants to take a short break?
Or be at liberty to take a break when needed.
Right.
Okay.
I'll just make one other suggestion on these things that Michael and I had mentioned. If you could come up with some criteria about what you're dealing with, rather than you're going to do this, but if we do this, these are the principles you want to follow. That, in our view, would really help. I mean, I think, obviously, I've reflected a bias. One of the principles that you really ought to have is you're considered both with the institutional point of each institution plus the statewide perspective. One is, I think, that whatever decision you make needs to respect place as well as recognize the benefit of synergy among the places. Another principle would be we're going to make sure we enhance differentiation and not just have everybody moving into a cookie cutter thing. I don't know what they are, but I think if you have those principles down and have consensus on them, you'll have, when subsequent decisions come up, you will have already reached consensus about those things. That's just a... Dan.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I want to say that from the perspective of a guy who's still pretty new in his role, that resonates with me. One of the things I fall back on very, very frequently in terms of my approach to decision making at Vermont Technical College is the phrase in the system mission, which is for the benefit of Vermont. Okay, so as we approach strategic decisions, how does this reinforce our mission for the benefit of Vermont? And I would find that level of sort of guiding principle from the board very, very helpful as we approach decisions that occur on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. I mean, that kind of a framework is very, 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 very meaningful. And I would highlight the differentiation. And I'm just offer this by way of an example, so the board thinks is conscious that it's a fluid situation and there's a lot going on already. In terms of differentiation, when we approach some of the decisions we had to make in terms of our expense profile, and we were looking at our academic programs as this sole applied technical institution offering 2 and 4-year degrees in the state of Vermont Technical College. We looked at the things that were unique that we offered that nobody else was going to offer. And then we looked at the things that we were having to offer to bolster that curriculum in terms of our humanities electives to round out, and the things that other institutions were offering that we could then work with them to supply our delivery. And that, the Empire States is the example, is a close example, but the vision for the way we're going to fulfill the delivery of our humanities electives is both in reliance on the humanities courses that are taught by our sister institutions in the state college system, the ability of a Vermont Tech mechanical engineering technology associate students to take an English level English humanities course online from the Community College of Vermont or online from Linden State will allow them to round out their degree. But we'll also look at ways of reinventing some of our internal courses so they achieve humanities electives. But that kind of differentiation, so I'm not trying to replicate on my campus or on my campuses things that other institutions are already providing in a more comprehensive way. That allows the system to be more comprehensive in its support for the benefit of the state. But it really does resonate to me to have a set of guiding principles as we approach those decisions that we're going to have to make.
That sounds great. I can't help but say that, and for the benefit of Vermont, has a lot of different layers to it too. And so if I'm picking on Linden right now, obviously Linden State College is like a major economic driver to the Northeast Kingdom. So that's one level for the benefit of Vermont. And it struck me, I don't know, some of our trustees were there for their commencement ceremony this spring. And it was interesting because there were some of their high enrollment programs are predominantly out-of-state students. So you can ask yourself, well, how many weather people do we need in the state? All right? Okay, I'm just asking. On the other hand, and on that one, I can sit there and look and see that really, 90% of the degrees in that program were to out-of-state students. And there was the outdoor recreation management, which is another high one, and it was like the whole page, which was like, I don't know, it was 40 people on that page or what, there wasn't one Vermonter student on it. On the other hand, when it came to the education programs, which are teaching our teachers, social sciences that are giving us our counselors, and those were predominantly Vermonters. And what I'm saying is that actually those programs that are high demand programs that are attracting students from outside, that are using NEBI in many of those cases as a regional student program, but are paying out-of-state tuition, are what's allowing Linden to not only be the economic driver in its region, but to support the programs that are educating Vermonters that are going to actually take jobs here in the state. So it's my only point is it's a complicated kind of...
This is a big-time advocate along the lines of what you just said. My colleague Dennis and I have been big advocates of something that people know called stewardship of place, or which, if you really look at the way your institutions interact, just engagement in community service and students engaged in sustainable communities, all that kind of activity, is really the critical element of this thing. So it's, I think even having a conversation as a system about what that means, partly to get it off the short-term workforce development issue. Because if you get out-of-state students to come here and they're engaged in their community, the probability of their sticking increases dramatically. So but I don't know, we've been a big advocate in Connecticut that in fact, the state ought to deliberately support each of the state universities in terms of their engagement, community engagement. Looking at the websites, whether there's Castleton or any, but that's a theme at your institutions already.
They do, yeah.
That's a major impact. They'll not only stick, but it actually is better undergraduate education. So going back to Dan's point, having a conversation about what is contribution to Vermont. In Connecticut, actually, those institutions are the key to people staying in those communities because they have cultural and other dimensions that make it possible for people to live in a place. So how your institutions contribute to livable communities in Vermont is another thing. It's just as a deeper thing than the normal thing of looking, this is the number of people we employ, and this is the number of nurses we produce. It's kind of a...
So, Mr. Chairman, I know. Actually, I don't know if David Walk is still on the phone or even awake, but he hasn't had a chance to weigh in. I didn't know if we wanted to hear from him or offer him a chance to, for not taking a break.
Actually, I thought Ames and Michael were making his arguments very, very effectively. So, but David, are you there?
I'm here. It's been an interesting 3 hours, and I must say that I've missed some of the nuance and some of the humor. I haven't heard all of it, so I really regret not being able to be with you. But Jerry, I very much appreciate being allowed to be on the phone, given where I am in my situation and this long goodbye. So I'm very, very grateful that I can be part of this and say hello to Ames and my friend Michael. I haven't seen you in a little while, but you look great.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
So I would be glad to respond. Jerry, I wanted to first respond, and hopefully it's not out of context, to the questions that you posed at the last meeting. There were 4 questions, 3 of which I think I can address now. Would you like me to do that very quickly first, and then maybe react to what Ames and Michael have said?
Or do you want to react to what they said and then hit us with the 3? Either way.
Well, let me see if I can, as briefly as possible, something Martha says all the time, try to weave it all in together. So your first question was what impact the name change would have on students. Would they have a different life under a university as opposed to a college? And is there a benefit that you see as a result of the change? So we will continue as the relationship-based, personalized education institution that we have been, focused on every student, treating them as we would any member of our own family. And classes will remain small. The undergraduate experience would not change markedly except for the fact that there will be more international students in their classes that will make us a more global community, and that's a good thing. There's a lot of excitement from students. There is a concern, however, that I should tell you about. I met with the Student Government Association in the spring. We talked about it. I know Jeff Weld, who's there, has some summer student interns working in the communications office, and they've expressed similar concerns, and that is, we're excited about the university idea. We'd love to see it on our diploma. We've had alums actually tweet in when they've heard about this, wondering if they can retroactively have their diploma changed. But at any rate, there is excitement, but there is a concern about cost. And at the point at which this is resolved, one way or the other, it's very important for us to emphasize the tuition freeze starting in the fall of 2016. It's a very positive move by the board in this context. And who knows what will happen in the future, except that I know the board will continue to exercise restraint on tuition increases. So the only negative is a potential concern about costs. We're freezing tuition for next year, starting in the fall of 2016. And my guess is that we will stay in line with the rest of the VSC, the new and improved VSC, whatever it will be named in the future. So that's the answer number 1. Number 2, it was a similar question about faculty. Modernizing our name, what effect will it have on faculty? And there was some reference to that by Ames in his comments. Our faculty will remain in the same bargaining unit. They will still experience the same cherished relationship-based personalized education that we enjoy now. They will have small classes. It will be as intimate as it always has been, and they will continue to do research, and probably more of it. But it is very important to remember that just as we have been a teaching college, we will become a teaching university. Not a research university like some of the big state flagship universities such as UVM, but instead and remaining focused on teacher-student interactions and as a teaching university. That is not to say that we will not engage in undergraduate and graduate research. We are doing that now. That research, according to our policy, is externally funded. We're very fortunate in our science department to be doing a lot of undergraduate research that we weren't doing a few years ago, funded through the NSF, through the Vermont Genetics Network. And those outside funds pay for the research. And we would continue with that policy of providing research opportunities for our students, undergraduate and graduate, but with external funding to support it. Our goal is to incrementally increase our enrollment. Nothing radical or drastic in the near term. That's part of the Castleton plan that you've seen that was adopted in 2013. During the time that the plan was discussed, it followed the first 10-year master plan that was concluded. So in our next strategic plan, the one that we're in now, very cleverly called the Castleton Plan, it was very clear from all the town meetings that we had that there was support for becoming a university, a small public university, as part of this system, small and public, part of the system, but with increased opportunities for graduate education, recruiting international students, and an important part of it is what we've already embarked upon, and that is the entrepreneurial efforts off campus, particularly in Rutland, but also throughout the state through the Center for Schools. We're in every county in the state, but through all of the ventures and entrepreneurial interests that actually serve Vermont. Everything we've done has been for the benefit of Vermont, and particularly the Rutland region. We will continue to do that. We actually think that that will be enhanced with university status. So I wanted to, before we get into question 3 is really a question for the other colleges, and that has to do with what impact there would be on the other colleges. I believe that was addressed at the last meeting. I would encourage you to talk to the presidents privately, publicly, in any way that you like to answer that question, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on that. The last question has to do with our communications plan that was sent to you, and I'm going to ask Jeff to address that. Before he does, I wanted to just briefly talk about a couple of comments that were made by Ames and Michael. Ames, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly.
Oh, yeah. You can pronounce it anyway. No, that's great.
All right.
Yeah, that's great.
We agree there are no more state resources. Castleton's, only 9% of Castleton's budget comes from the state. We would love that to be better. We don't expect it to change. Therefore, we cannot stand still. We need to grow if we're going to survive and thrive. Not necessarily in terms of increased enrollment in a dramatic way at the undergraduate level going forward, but with our entrepreneurial ventures and with our graduate programming. And we understand that we can't be a mile wide and inch deep. That's why everything we have done and will do will be strategic with a lot of homework. An example is the international program. Last year we hired 2 full-time people. One who was an international recruiter, a Chinese American named Patrick Liu, who has worked with our faculty and our deans and has led 2 trips to China where we've developed and I've signed either 9 or 10 articulation agreements. We've got a couple in India as well. We have focused on regions that we believe will be interested in Castleton. An example is we've got about a dozen Chinese teachers who will study to become special educators who will be in residence at Castleton this year. Our hope is that they will love us, that they will appreciate the education they received, they will go back to their schools and encourage any and all of their students to also have the Castleton experience. So I want you to know that we didn't just come up with this focus. We've actually been planning it for several years. On the other side, we've also made steps to change the culture, because bringing in, we already have some international students, bringing in more will require us to change the way we do business in terms of ESL offerings, which we already have, and basically changing the culture to accommodate people who may look or think differently than we do, and 70% of our students are Vermonters from perhaps the whitest state in the country. So this is about enhancing the quality of the academic experience for all of our students, and that we are laser focused on that goal. You also mentioned regional collaboration and statewide collaboration. We have a wonderful collaboration with the Community College of Vermont, and I believe that can only be enhanced as we go forward. We trust each other. We have articulation agreements across our curriculum. I can only imagine that getting better. You also said you need to up the ante on urgency by reducing costs and offering quality programs, and reducing the cost to students. And that's exactly what the board has done with the vote, which I believe was unanimous, to freeze tuition for next year. And we've embraced that. We will, frankly, be utilizing that as we reach out to students throughout the fall. And, you know, whether it's in Vermont or in Pennsylvania or Florida or in India or in China, we will be making that case for affordability. I understand what you said about there being no silver bullet on international students, and our research has shown that you're right. But if you do it the right way with a proper focus and a lot of homework, I believe that we'll be successful, because we're already seeing some of that success. And Michael, you had talked about the importance of a well-integrated, comprehensive system. I think we have that, but it's only going to get better from what I've heard over the last 3 hours and the way that the board has been headed. I just think it's interesting that when you were asked a question about New Hampshire, where Keene and Plymouth have converted to university status just a few years ago, they are our main competitors. And if you take the number of students who are accepted to Castleton and matriculate elsewhere over the last 10 years, at the top of the list, every single year, it's Keene, Plymouth, and UVM. And the order may be different, but they're our main competitors. So you made a good case for us in that respect. So I have so much more that I'd like to say, but I'm conscious of the time, and I know Jerry wants also to prepare for the next meeting. But I also think that you should know that we are very well prepared should you agree with the modernization of Castleton's name to communicate this in different ways. And I think Jeff sent you at least part of a memo that Jeff had sent him about that. And to answer your fourth question, and this is the last, what is the name change going to cost? How we've begun changing our mark, and what is the plan for cost and communications going forward? And that's why Jeff is there. So I can conclude with that, answer any questions or hear reactions or comments, or that humor I missed. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Dave. Really, I think it's brief as possible. I know that you all received the plan, and I tried to keep it at 40,000 feet. But please understand that my office is prepared either way to move forward with whatever decision. But the reality of the decision becomes the cost is rolled into our strategic marketing plan regardless. We've done a nice job over the last decade strengthening Castleton as our brand. We feel that that's where our strength lies, and that really from a marketing perspective, university sort of builds off of that strength. So that the cost will be minimal, and essentially rolled out in a manner that would be seen regardless. We need to purchase new letterhead every year. The change would be incremental. The Castleton brand is strong. That wouldn't change. If you have leftover business cards, they still say Castleton. That's workable. Signage. So it's all really a good jump-off point. And from an admission standpoint, the timing and being this summer and thinking about a tuition freeze on the horizon, if we can really capitalize on those two really great pieces of communication, I think it really is great timing to maximize those two things if we were able to sort of get this through and into the next recruitment cycle. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the plan. I don't think I need to get too specific about tasks and strategies, but I'm happy to do so if the committee members would like to hear more.
Questions to David or to Jeff? Karen?
I have a question for David.
David, can you hear Karen?
You know, I've been able to hear Karen better than anybody, so go ahead.
How do I take that, David? Okay. How did you catch the I'm going to call it the yeah but from the two guest speakers who endorsed the concept of a Castleton University, but cautioned us that there's a faculty culture that can just take lead and run with the ball, so to speak, with a new university, causing things to happen that perhaps you don't intend right now. And none of us are in a place forever. I mean, I'm not going to be on this board forever. You're not going to be president forever. So the decision we make is going to be longer lasting than any of us in our present positions. How do you respond to that faculty culture comment?
Well, it's an interesting question, but I'm confident, number one, we have the same bargaining agreement for all the institutions. And number two, our goal is to continue the kind of teaching institution that we have always been. And I know the faculty pretty well. We've been together for 14 years. They know a lot and they care a lot for their students. They cherish the small classes that we have, the kind of relationship-based personalized education that we have. And my opinion is that that's not going to change. I believe that they're excited about it. Certainly, when I met with the faculty chairs over the spring, there was just such palpable excitement in the room. There were questions, frankly, about the international students and what that would mean for the culture of the college and what the process would be. We already have students, but what are we talking about in terms of scope? But from what I can tell from the department chairs who I've met with recently and from the discussions that took place during the Castleton plan, there's a lot of enthusiasm for this. 10 years down the road, I don't think we can predict anything except for the fact that my guess is that we will all still be in the same system, perhaps with a new name, but with the same vision and purpose to serve Vermont.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions to David or to Jeff? Ames?
This is a question, David. I was wondering when you were talking about it, whether there might be a way that you might be able to suggest some benchmarks the board might have to monitor the things that you're saying. For example, I think there's a good deal of evidence about the kind of change in faculty workloads, but your intent is not to have it. So that's just one, but also would be, it could be around any of the positive things that you're talking about, so that you and the board together can monitor whether in fact things are happening. So if I were a board member, I would want to say, I'm not only approving this, but actually these are some quantitative things that we're following to see whether they in fact happen. For example, does enrollment grow? What is the balance between graduate and undergraduate? One of the difficulties, as you know, because you've been a president, is a lot of faculty time right now is in too small classes in upper division, in too small departments that are unsustainable. So even the image of small classes is not going to be sustainable. So I don't know what the indicators are, but could you think of a situation where in fact the board had a set of indicators they followed with you to see whether these things are happening or what the consequences are?
The answer is yes. We already have sort of a dashboard of indicators that the board looks at regularly. I would add to that, given the reasons for this modernization, that we look at graduate program enhancements, not necessarily the undergraduate experience, because we believe that we should continue incremental growth there, but look at graduate enrollments, look at the international student numbers, and importantly, look at the entrepreneurial initiatives in Vermont, specifically in the Rutland region, but throughout the state. What's happening with the Castleton Center for Schools in all 14 counties? What's happening to the Center for Entrepreneurship? How is our polling institute doing statewide? How is our service learning work going? Have we increased the numbers of students, and have we attracted more businesses, more employers to allow for service learning in its many forms? Those are some of the benchmarks that we would look at to determine how effective this change is.
Great.
You know what I was thinking too? I was thinking about the sort of those benchmarks while David was talking, and I was thinking about it from a different perspective. I've been through this a lot, and as far as enrollment goes, I mean, it could conceive. I was thinking about Plymouth State. Is what I was thinking about. Okay, the question is, did it go down less slowly than it otherwise would have gone down? Or like with international students, I mean, maybe it wouldn't be that you converted to university, it's that you hired 2 people and you're doing all this work. So could you really attribute it to being a university? And all these criteria, they're good, but there's a lot of factors, like enrollment in community colleges tend to go up when the economy goes down. So did you do something wrong, or
There's another reason, though, also, it goes back to my point, I'm picking on churches, that I think with each of your institutions, which you may now do, you want to have a limited number of things that you're monitoring related to each one of them. And the other benefit for the board is honestly saying, what is it that we're doing wrong or could do, which in fact turned around this thing that isn't going well. So it's a way for you to monitor how you could change your policies. For example, if you have a goal of increasing collaboration among institutions and it's not happening, it may well be that you put no money in the middle to provide incentives for that to happen. I mean, excuse me, why is this? Or you could take examples of why collaboration is working well and say, so anyway, it's a way for the board also to learn, what's going on.
And I would say it's a really good opportunity for you, wherever this document lives in the system, but as you're talking here about a change of, a modernization, if you will, of the name of the institution, it's time to take out the document that we've talked about. We've talked about differentiation here and mission. We've talked about sort of the cohesiveness and collaboration as well. But presumably there's a document that says this institution's mission is A, B, C, and D, specific to institution. And, we want them to grow in such a fashion, or we want them to, expand in graduate work, or we want them to focus in a given area. And I think this is a good time for you to step back and say, okay, do we want other universities in the system, or is Castleton that university? If so, what would the criteria be for that change? Would it reflect, again, similar changes here, or would it reflect broader needs of the state? What is our goal for growth in graduate and or international student enrollment across institutions and the system. I think it's a good chance for you to step back and whatever that document is, figure out how you would change it and update it, and also describe it in terms of institutional evolution and change over time to meet the needs of Vermont.
Great. Where do we go from here? It sounds like we're at a point where, do we need a motion, a resolution? Do we say, go for it, Dave?
The board has to vote.
Right.
Isn't the idea to
We need
take
to
it
make
to
a
the-
recommendation to the board. It was hoped that that could be done for the July board meeting. We could do that today. We could do it at our July 16th meeting after everybody's had a chance to just digest what today we've gone and heard and what.
Well, sort of follow up, I guess, what Craig is asking. Somehow specifically, we've never asked the chancellor. I don't know if that was part of your question or not.
I mean, it seems like we've heard from most people here in the room. Is there any, I mean, I would like to know where do you think we ought to go?
Well, I mean, I think I was hoping that we would make the decision, that we would be prepared to make a recommendation to the board for the July 23rd meeting. I was hoping that we'd be, ready to do that at the July 16th meeting. I don't know if something's gone faster here or not. Pretty much people know my perspective, I think, which is that I think it's clear. I think that we ought to continue the movement we've had to build our system. And I think for the benefit of Vermont, we should try to be as comprehensive, interconnected, and cohesive as we can with multiple distinct institutions within it. I think we ought to keep trying hard to find out, how we can best make sure that churches admit to 1, go to 5, or whatever it was, something like that. How we turn that into a reality. And also, look to maximize the cost efficiencies and ways to at least, hopefully, make the quality education as affordable as we can by being that comprehensive, interconnected, cohesive system. So, having said that, I mean, I've always felt, Craig, that decision needs to be made first. We have to know. I mean, if we did want to go, Penn State or UMaine, then the second part about Castleton gotta wait. I myself, I don't really know why, if we've reached consensus, which I think we may have, that we really ought to go the system route. Why we need to really wait longer than a reasonable. What other information we could get that would help us with a decision as to whether it would be good for Castleton to be part of that system. Myself, in short, and I'll make it real short, is I think for everything we've heard in terms of for this college itself, I think it would be beneficial. But I also think, in my own view of system, of being able to, have that comprehensive system, everything from being able to get a credential to a 2-year degree, to go to a professional-oriented small liberal arts college in Linden, I don't mean to pick on all of them, but to a small public university would be a great concept. So I have to admit, to me, that all holds together, so I look at it, I think it's fine for Castleton. I don't think it's going to make all that much difference. In terms of, I didn't mean that. I did not mean it will make a difference, but I don't think it'll make a bottom line difference right away. Over time, will it allow? I actually see it as more like the one thing we know is standing still is our enemy. And when I look back at where, I don't know, I'm getting wound up now, which I probably shouldn't.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
When David Block came in 14 years ago, Castleton was in trouble. And it's a whole different place now. And you don't have to, anybody can go down there and see what a different place it is and the feel of the place. Everything from, from the academics to the student experience to the football and the baseball teams. I mean, it's a beautiful, that athletic facility is like, we don't have a lot of those everywhere. And, you know, it's a package, the whole thing to me. But I think instead of just standing still is not enough. You know, the energy to keep that going. And I think this would provide actually the impetus to make sure that they don't get complacent. So, you know, from an institutional perspective, I think it's good. But I also think from, you know, where we want to go as a system and where I want to try to help by letting the public, the legislature, you know, everybody know what the Vermont State Colleges or our successor name is or would be, you know, what we have to offer. And everybody's heard me say this. I don't think Vermonters, too many Vermonters, do not have a good understanding of the quality and breadth of the educational and extracurricular experiences that we provide within our system. And being able to say, hey, this is comprehensive, this is what we have, will benefit everybody within the system. So, you know, the question is, I mean, I was hoping we could make it in July. We don't have to. But I don't know, I actually don't know what more we need to know. And I would love to see us go into the retreat, actually saying, let's get that out of the way. And now let's talk about what those goals and principles are and how do we turn it into reality and what do we want to really call what do we want to call our student selves? I mean, Vermont State College and University or Vermont Higher Education System or Consortium or whatever, and, you know, work, sort of get some of it out of the way. So, you know, if the board's not ready to do that or the committee's not ready to do that, hey, we'll work with that.
Thank you. But I want to make sure before we deal with the issue. Yes? David?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, all right. I thought you started to say something.
No, I've just been listening quietly.
Okay. I wanted to make sure every member of the committee had a chance to express how they felt about the two issues. So in some way to try to find whether there's a consensus or there's not, and then I have an idea of, if there is, how to move it along. So we've not really said how we feel about these issues. We've had a great 3-hour conversation this afternoon. Yes, our chancellor has said how he feels. Our chairperson, the chairperson of the board has, but I haven't heard from Church or from Karen or from Heidi or Craig, although I think I know where Craig stands based on his action call for action. So I want to make sure any member of the committee that wants to be heard on this, and including the time frame in which we should be making our decision, please, this is your time to speak up. Karen?
I was interested, as I indicated, to a couple of folks that I've had conversation with between our last meeting and this. My concern was that we not, however worthy the arguments were that David presented, and I think they were very worthy, very compelling arguments that David raised concerning Castleton, and that it looked good for Castleton. My concern was that we not rush very quickly to judgment and preclude other possibilities that would be precluded by that action. I'm more comfortable, although I will tell you that even at that point, I was comfortable with the notion of a consortium, for lack of better words, of different schools that have seamless opportunities from within. So that would be more in keeping with number 3, the third proposal, than it would with the other two. I have been influenced by these two gentlemen who made presentations that number 2 would be confusing and not offer benefits. And that, so I'm not at all uncomfortable with number 3. My only hesitation I shouldn't say hesitation. I personally think we need a rebranding, and I think that might well include a new name. I think that Vermont State College is confusing for the public at large. I've had legislators ask me how things were going at UVM when they found out that I was a Vermont State College, and these were long-standing legislators. And I think that people confuse the two already, so the UVM president's concern is already does exist. I'm really enamored with the Rutgers and William and Mary kind of name for a state college that's independent of the name of the state, and I know that there were some problems with that because of the recent legislation that requires the name of Vermont, and I don't know if that's something we might want to visit in the future. But I think that we need a re-energizing and a repackaging of wonderful opportunities that we uniquely present to the people of the state of Vermont. So I'm not unhappy with going with number 3, and with that in mind, I'm not, I would support the name change for Castleton with the caveat that we have those benchmarks, and I'm going to call it University Slide. I want to put something in place so that we memorialize that we don't want that to happen to Castleton, which would have, I think, adverse effects for the whole system.
We call it Uno Academy.
Others on the committee that want to express their view? Church.
I think that having Michael and Ames here today has been extremely helpful. And I think that you've helped us to come very close to consensus, if not consensus, that we prefer not to be used very loosely and amateurishly, the idea of a single accredited institution called the Vermont State whatever, and we have 5 different units where we do our work, that we want to maintain some sense of being a consortium of colleges that each have their own flavor and identity and perhaps specialty, and when we put it all together, it fits for the benefit of Vermont. I think for me personally, that was a big step to get over, to get past that point. I have to be absolutely frank, as the newest member of the committee with Mike, it's a little surprising that with people like Ames telling us, do you realize how close the wolves are to your front door? You have really got to bump up your urgency here. That our highest priority is what we call one of our institutions. That seems to be consuming a disproportionate amount of our time and energy is, what do we call Castleton? When in fact the entire system's under siege. But setting that aside, I agree with Karen that I think we need to be very careful, to be convinced that a name change for Castleton is not going to box us in and preclude options that apply to the total system. When I looked at the appreciative inquiry, what is it? There's no reference there to changing the name of one of our institutions. This is something that's come on the agenda quite late. I understand there are a lot of reasons for that. But I want to be sure that a name change doesn't box us in and feel that we've lost options that we might find valuable down the road. I want to be convinced that the net gain will not only be to Castleton, but to the system, whether it's enrollment or grantsmanship or whatever it might be. Said another way, I don't want the gains to one of the 5 be at the expense of the other 4. And finally, I guess I would say there are bound to be unintended consequences. And, one of them might be the University of Vermont could become totally unglued. How are we going to manage that? What can we do to be sure that doesn't happen? So that we create a totally unnecessary rift within the public system in Vermont. Or or people who would just be naturally suspicious of what are they up to? What's their agenda? We find ourselves having to do a lot of explaining that we might not have otherwise done. I don't think we can imagine all the unintended consequences. I had the odd reputation as the person who named Fletcher Allen Healthcare. It was the compromise name. It was far better than one of the options, which was Omnicare. I felt really good about recommending Fletcher Allen Healthcare because it sounded better to Vermonters than Omnicare. But that institution has dealt with 20 years of trying to live with that name because it was not warmly received. And that sounds like it certainly wouldn't be the case at Castleton. And we never thought that it would be as controversial as it was. And so there are bound to be unintended consequences. We need to be prepared for them. I feel least comfortable about having to make this decision for July, but I would certainly support the Chancellor and the Board if that's what everybody wants to do. I'll support you wholeheartedly. But I just want to, I'm not quite comfortable making the decision today. Every time we meet, I seem to get a little more comfortable with making a decision. But those are my thoughts, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, George. Heidi?
I agree with what has been said so far, and I love Castleton. I love where Castleton has come from and where it's headed. I'm not opposed to changing the name of Castleton. I am concerned as well about those unintended consequences. And I think that we as a board need to be really careful that we're not making a quick decision. And I know we've talked about this and how much more can be said, but I think we do need to really examine what some of those possibilities are, just so we don't make a decision that we're feeling is kind of being, and not that it is, but if the feeling that we need to make this decision quickly, are we missing something because of that urgency? I don't want it to, I would love to be able to make a decision on July 23rd, and I am more comfortable with it every meeting that we have, but those unintended consequences make me nervous. And in terms of a system, I'm very comfortable with 5 individually accredited colleges and just keep working toward more comprehensive, integrated system.
Great. I don't want to rush into anything either, but I also don't want to drag our feet just talking about things if it's already been talked about. And I think it would give us kind of a black eye if we held Castleton up from an opportunity to move forward with the way that you all do things with your enrollment or with your recruitment. I think we need to think about how it's going to have an impact on the other schools in our system. It sounds like it won't have a negative effect on them, so that put my mind at ease. I think we need to move forward with how can we make this system as strong as possible? How can we make this system have some name recognition? I'm a product of New York State schools. When I tell people outside of this area, when they ask where did I go to college, I always hesitate. Do I say Oswego? Because then they get that puzzled look on their face, except for Dave, but that's because we beat Castleton in hockey one year. But if I say SUNY, then they're like, oh, you went to SUNY. And then where did you go? And then there's a reason why you picked the school that you did within that system. And I think that's what we need to move forward to. And we need to have that name where when people in Vermont and out of Vermont hear the name of our system, their ears perk up. And people want to come to our system. And then once they're in that system, they go to that unique school, that unique university that suits their needs.
I'd like to add one more thing. I also think that it's we need to recognize the energy behind this whole thing at Castleton, and I hope we can all agree to move forward on this, because I think to pull that out from under them at this point would be a real morale deflator, and we don't want to do that. So I really think we need to find a way to do it. And we need to find a way to do it as quickly as possible, but we all need to feel comfortable with it.
I second what you're saying, Heidi. As I mentioned to David the other night, the one thing that I take the greatest comfort in here is David and his leadership, as we've seen it at Castleton, and the process that he's gone through to bring his college to this point. I think that has been first-rate work, and it's something the team needs to be proud of. The horns of the dilemma that I am on is what's the right thing for Castleton and the right thing for VSC. I wanted to be sure we do both.
Jim?
Yeah, as a non-committee member, I've gotten over my Dartmouth College hang-up of the previous meeting, and I think if Castleton wants to go forward as being a university, there's no reason, can't think of any reason to hold them up. And rebranding of the state college system, or whatever we're going to call it, I think is in order, but I'm not sure just exactly how we do that at this point in time. That needs to be done carefully. One thing that I wouldn't want to have happen is we rush out a new name and it's received by the public as being pretentious, too big for our britches, kind of stuff like that. And we really need to match substance with name, and I think we can do that. We just need to think it through very carefully and put our common sense where our mouth is, that sort of stuff like that. So we'll get to that when we get to that. But at least I've gotten over my, hang up of a month ago or whatever it was.
Dan?
I'm not going to wander into the substance of the question you asked, but I do want to jump on the idea of being too big for our britches. We have 3.5 times the number of Vermont undergraduates of any other public institution in the state. And if you control for CCB, we have 40% more Vermont undergraduates than the next biggest institution in this state. We're growing into our britches, and I think we count, as presidents, we count on the board to make the case that we are big enough for our britches, and in fact our britches are growing. It's really important for the state to understand the footprint of these 5 individual institutions and the impact we have on Vermont. Thank you.
I would concur with President Dan's comments. We just need to be sensible about how we do this. That's all, and we can do that.
Michael, would you like your
Sure. I think the discussion today's been great, and the discussion we had at the previous board meeting, committee meeting was equally great. These are sort of new issues for me as a new board member, but from what I can tell, David and his team have been at work at this for a while and have put a great deal of thought into it, so even though it might be a new decision at this committee level, I think it's something that a great deal of thought and care has gone into, and certainly in favor of empowering Castleton, and it seems like there's a lot of concrete benefit for them and not necessarily a lot of downside that's been articulated for the system as a whole. So I think that name change is something that I'd be anxious to see the whole board discuss and move forward on. In terms of the larger sort of rebranding, I think I keep going back to what Church said about acceptance 1 and learning at 5. I think that's really a good sort of approach. And something that Dan said today about not double up. I think the word was not duplicating non-core functions, maybe, or focusing on what each institution does and how they can offer and share their resources to other institutions, and really focusing on the benefit of the students and having those be sort of really core guiding posts for the rebranding of the entire system, which it sounds like it's option 3, is something that I think would be great guideposts.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to comment? Madam Chairman, would you like to say anything at this stage, or have you said it?
No, I would hope, I guess, Jerry, if people had other concerns, other questions, that they would get those questions to Jim. And you have a meeting scheduled for the 16th. And listening God, Heidi and I have been on this board forever, I think, but we usually are in sync on how we think. And I respect her for saying, let's not rush into something until we know all the answers. I don't disagree with that, but I would hope that on the 16th, that all the questions would be asked, would be answered, and that we could move forward on the July 23rd for the two decisions. Get those out of the way so when we spend 2 days at the retreat, we can get down to more of the nitty-gritty. I think we can drag this out until we're all so tired of it. And I do know that we asked, when we appointed the chancellor, to have a chancellor who could come in, and he was ready to move and give us his best advice. And that's what he's doing. And I think for us not to listen to that advice and not to listen to the advice of the presidents is going to have them think we don't trust them, we're not listening to them. And they are spending hours on this issue. And I did figure out one day the cost per day for all this thought process, all right? I went through that and I thought, I think that money could be better spent after we make this decision. And then we get the chancellor and the presidents, so direction. This is what we would like to have you come forward with. I think we can move on, and I would hope it would be on the 23rd. I think we can spend that whole meeting, I think, except for maybe 1 hour, different things that I've mentioned already that we should have on the agenda, so we can pretty much have a full board discussion, unless Jeb has done a lot of other issues for that day.
Well, we have some other things, but this would be at the top of the list.
This would be at the
We'd
top
be at the top of the list. And I really would like to state that it is a balancing act, and I understand that. And, you know, like some of us that are getting paid right now, think about this like almost 24 hours a day. And not everybody has the luxury that somebody like me does. As far as new, I mean, Jerry, you and I started talking about what about Vermont State University before I actually started on the job. So that thought process has been going on for a while. And shortly after we started, David, there you are on the phone, started talking about this Castleton plan they've had, you know, and I said, oh, gee, that's interesting. Well, what is it? And I've been down and met with his cabinet. And so for me, it isn't a new topic, but I do understand that it's important for board members that haven't had the luxury and the time to go through that, to work through the process. And that's the balance that, you know, I don't mind that. I understand it. And so, you know, I want people to feel comfortable, not like it's being ramrodded through. But also, you know, to your point, is to make sure that we actually, and everybody's point, is that we spend our limited time together on stuff that, like, really is going to matter. And that we probably don't need, if it's things that are going to happen, if we move along, we have more time to spend on bigger issues.
Karen?
I'd just like to make 2 points, and I'm going to respectfully disagree with my good friend Martha. Some of us here are children of the 60s, and to the day we're go to our graves, we're going to be challenging and questioning, and you know, I guess it's just in my nature. I would have no problem challenging any authority figure, not the least of which would be you, Jeff.
Don't worry, I'm from the 60s too.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, I sat back at one meeting, and I think you hadn't been here very long, maybe 2 or 3 meetings, and I sat back and I thought, boy, this is really wonderful. I haven't ever been on a board with people, I thought, this is really wonderful. I'm in agreement with a lot that's being said, and I thought, what is it? We're children of the 60s. We have the same mindset. We're coming in with the same value system. And I think it's wonderful to be able to challenge things and question things and for folks to know that even when they lobby, and a lot of us have gray hair and have been around lobbying different efforts, and we all know when we're being lobbied, so that's fine, and there's some humor in it. But we're going to be brought along, but we're ready to be brought along. And for me, the issue is, as I said before, and I'm willing to make a decision, but it's important for me that the group, that the entire board, be comfortable with the decision. And for me, that comfort level has to do with what's good for the system. All the parts have got to be well served. And for me, that means that we have to look at these three options, and maybe if there's another option, be able to, with clear conscience and integrity, discard those options that would not allow for Castleton to be a university. So if we can do that, and I think I'm at that point, and I'm at the point, I believe, where I think that option 3 is a good option for the system, then I think we can move with integrity, and I think that might be done in July. But for me, it's important that the whole board be at that point. And I'm less concerned with not following than I am with not making a good decision.
Is option 3 actually in our document
It
somewhere?
is.
Well, that's good.
That, it's in the email, your email to Ames and Michael, they listed
I'll find it there.
1, 2, 3.
I know in my mind the concept of what I'm
Option 3 is
buying into, but I think it's, I number 3, but I just want to read it.
It's a new rebranded system.
Yeah.
Greater interconnectedness, but not the adoption of, it was separate accredited, but not the adoption of a central
Single
university with
Okay.
separate accredited. And David, you can't see, excuse me, Joyce, did you want to comment first? I saw that hand.
Well, that's okay. A couple things I would just say. I actually want to just echo what, or support what Martha said. I would love to see the board make a decision, make both decisions, because I think Castleton University is fine. But I think you have to change the Vermont State Colleges at the same time, because then it is a really confusing message to the public. Because you've got Vermont State Colleges, now you've got Castleton University. I mean, the questions that have been after the press has been, so is Castleton leaving the Vermont State Colleges? And so I think a system, when you think about, so why are we doing this? Why are we having this conversation? Sometimes I have to keep asking myself why we keep having this. But I think really, I'd like to believe that we're elevating our brand. And if you think about a system, that allows everything from the community college at one end to a university at the other, and everything in the middle. It's comprehensive. And I think in terms of bringing some additional value to Vermont, I think people could get behind that and really understand how this all hangs together. What worries me is if we allow Castleton University to happen without changing the Vermont State Colleges, and believe me, I don't want to slow down the Castleton University for all the reasons that we've been talking about, but I think if we really want to have an impact on increasing our visibility, you talk about a system, people think, oh, there's lots of different pieces to the system, and where do I fit into the system? So I really would ask, I'd like to encourage the board to think about both of those. Now, what we call it, that might take a little bit longer, but you buy into the concept that we're moving from the Vermont State Colleges to a system of colleges and entities. And I actually liked a lot what Ames has said is, I think we can't ever lose sight of the place. And I will use the Community College of Vermont as an example. Students associate with a location. Like when they go to Springfield or they take a course in Winooski, to them, the Community College of Vermont is the Community College of Vermont's location in Springfield. Even though they take online courses, they might take a course in Brattleboro, but they associate with a place, and I think we can't lose track of that. So as we think about the value of the system, what are the pieces that we need to, from a student perspective, are really important that we create the opportunity for students. It's not just about the resources of all 5 schools, but what are the ones that we're really going to promote that students think, oh, and then make it really easy for those. Now, yes, they have the resources of all of them, but it's what, they need to be, we need to lead them to what are the opportunities. So I just would say, I would just like to encourage the board to think about the concept of a system as you endorse the support for Castleton University, so that it doesn't feel like Castleton is now either off, they've chosen to go in a different place. It just adds value.
And quite frankly, I couldn't agree more. Castleton University on an island without the strength of the system, it essentially weakens our ability to be that strong brand that we've become. And I couldn't agree with you.
Would it be appropriate, Jerry, for maybe the administration to come to the next meeting with a proposal for a system name change?
And for both, I'm going to ask to do both.
Okay.
And Dave, you can't see me, but I'm waving the white flag. I surrender. I've heard enough today. So, and there is a consensus on the committee.
Karen just said that she would protest even the Pope, so Jim talked.
Not this Pope, man. This Pope is awesome.
No, I like this Pope.
I'm wondering if some church.
I'm thinking of converting. Not really.
So what I thought was, since we're getting close again, that there really is a consensus. There are questions remaining which we can discuss, but within the context of a resolution. And I would ask the administration to prepare a comprehensive resolution that dealt with both issues. Number one, the system change. We want a system change. And number two, within the context of that, the second issue, the recommendation to the board on both of these, the approval of Castleton University. And if you want to lay out a process for how we're going to resolve a name change in conjunction with the system change. Heidi, does that
Yeah.
encompass what
And
you...
I would
where we-
just put in a plug for something that might allow us to keep the acronym VSC. I don't, just, maybe, I think that there might be some strength in that, but maybe it's better to have it totally different. So I'm open to, I guess, as I'm starting
What I was
saying
thinking,
that.
Heidi, would be one of the pieces, we'd have a lot to do with the retreat, but might be to invite the marketing teams, so we don't spend a lot of money on it, from each one of the colleges in the system to help us think through. And I think we'd first want to sort of say, okay, let's remind ourselves, get back to the principles and the goals. So what is it we want to communicate, and then let's figure out.
Dead silent. Please don't spend your retreat on wordsmithing. Whether
Yeah, no. That's why I think they need to bring the recommendation, because if they leave it up to the board to come up with ideas, we could spend the whole next year
I'd like Fletcher out.
names for us.
Minority.
Sorry, Margaret.
And within the context of our discussion at the next meeting, I'd like to pick up with where Church and Karen and I think Heidi, the unintended consequences, the discussion within the context of the resolution, so that we have some further discussion about what are the consequences that we likely will see, and because and those the benchmarks of what the board should be looking at to, in effect, hold Castleton's feet to the fire. That this is what they proposed. It was based on a set of facts, which and what we as a board should be looking at to make sure that it was successful as we look at it after the fact.
Jerry, may I add, forgive me, I don't want to interrupt, but I really appreciated the points about benchmarks and unintended consequences. And what I would just encourage the board to do is look closely at the strategic plan, because the strategic plan contains benchmarks about enrollment, graduate programs. It also includes what faculty should expect in terms of support. So I think it addresses many of your issues that are really well taken.
And I don't know, Tony, I don't recall myself, it may have happened, but Elaine, I don't remember distributing that strategic plan to the board members.
We
So-
got it
It's
last.
in
You
the
did get it?
last
Okay.
time.
Some of the materials.
This time around, or
No,
last
the
meeting?
last-
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah,
All right,
Before,
because-
yeah.
But we can send it again in the next materials.
well, whatever, as long as we did it, it's fine.
Is it in the minutes?
No, it's in the, not the prep material for this meeting, but the prep material for our last
it was
meeting.
in- I think Tony's referring to Castleton.
Yes. It was in the prep material for our last meeting.
Now, Michael?
Well, just a final thought. I think, I always love to watch the dynamics and the collective decision-making of boards, and I think you've done a really great job here, and it reflects, I think, the experience and wisdom of everybody involved. And I would say use this, collectively, these two decisions, as an opportunity to further refine and declare the forward-moving vision for the system. Castleton clearly has already done that, but I would say don't lose that opportunity. You've talked about this integration, cohesiveness. I think to change the name and not have that vision, I think you're going to need both of those for the credibility and to be able to justify if and when the questions come up. So, take advantage of that opportunity in your retreat for the same. I think, your conversations about not wanting to make any missteps or unintended consequences, I think for the purposes of your conversation, you ought to have a team and or a committee that thinks about, okay, what are the rounds we need to make on this in advance of any change? What are the key conversations we have had or need to have to make sure you sort of tick some boxes of, who the stakeholders within and without the system might be, because you're absolutely right. You don't want, to let the balloons fly, only to have the balloons deflate. As to the timing of Castleton, I think you all will be able to figure that out. The middle of the summer is probably not the time to change the name of an institution because nobody's around. So you guys can, I wouldn't over-pressure yourself in terms of needing to make that decision today. And the first day of school is probably not the time to make that decision either because students are trying to figure out where their dorm is. So you guys, I think, have a little bit more time, to figure all that out. And I think in conversation with the Castleton people, you can make that happen. But I think, you ought to talk at your retreat. You ought to talk, formal vision that when we go out and explain what it is we're about and the justification as to why we're going to alter our name and why Castleton is part of this, the changes at Castleton are part of this larger vision and the change in the direction that we're expressing here. And, maybe again, just a plan around how you make the rounds.
This is an ideal thing, but it would really make a difference to have statements from the University of Vermont coincident with this, that they're supportive of it, and in fact, they're a key element of the system. That what Vermont has is not only this system, but also the system actually includes a strong University of Vermont. So that's seen as complementary. One of the worst things, I would say a really Achilles heel for half the states is they do not have a way to think of the system as a whole that is non-bureaucratic, okay? It goes back to the original conversation we had earlier. So I would do downfield blocking with the University of Vermont that they understand what this is and they're ready with statements to say, we are a system which includes us and others, and this is the role. Now that's an idealistic thing, but you're going to get an awful lot more out of it that way. It's something in Connecticut set up a sort of a state college and university system, and UConn over here. And we've got UConn to say, even with all their basketball teams, actually, they are complementary to the other institutions. And it makes a tremendous difference with the legislature.
Well, I think that's a good point. And we have a good relationship with the University of Vermont. Martha stays in touch with the board chair. I try to stay in touch with the president. Matter of fact, we were together earlier this week. I think we understand that we are complementary. I don't know. And they're aware of the direction that we're talking about going to. So,
and even a statement that they might in fact work to play their role to make things seamless for students.
That
would
might be it would be remarkable, yes.
It wouldn't happen this
But
summer.
let me say this, just for our out-of-state visitors, and in case everybody else knows this, but say this wrong, but the largest feeder school for the University of Vermont is the Community College of Vermont. And the credits earned at the Community College of Vermont are perfectly, happily accepted at the University of Vermont. So we already have a lot of systems work with those guys.
So, yeah, use your friendships to get some positive statements out of it, we think.
Are there other issues, aside from resolving our first issue as the Long Range Planning Committee, that you would like to take up at the July 16th meeting? Or are we going to leave the rest of it to the Chancellor as well? Other things? I'm not seeing hands.
I would leave the rest of the agenda respectfully to the Chancellor and the Chair of this committee in consultation with the Chair of the Board to put together.
Yeah, I'm thinking, Mr. Chairman, I mean, you know, my brain is like a little fried right now. There's a lot that what this committee is going to want to do. Whether we want to start at July 16th, I don't know, or whether we could get by with a 2 or 3 hour meeting instead of a 4 hour meeting that day. We should talk about that together, depending, and then move on from there.
So then, is there anything else to be brought up by either the members of the committee or guests?
I would like to thank you for being open-minded about this. I know you're sick of my phone calls and probably a few other phone calls around here, but you always listened to what I was saying, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Yes?
I'm thinking about what Ames and Michael have said about constituencies, getting people involved, and I'm wondering if it might be helpful to survey either, you know, the communities of Vermont, I mean, the state of Vermont, people in the state, or even the campuses that, because you're talking about changing the name of the system, talking about changing the name of one of its members, and I bet a lot of people have opinions about that, and it might help your decision.
Okay.
Or create opportunities for dialogues around these issues, so that those thoughts can be brought up and you can answer the questions directly. So
And you want to, this, you know, I keep getting Michael's point about, keep thinking about bureaucracies and structures. What you're really talking about is a shared commitment of a whole lot of people, and most of your people are happen to be faculty and others. You've got to get them all on board here, guys.
And even when it's a good decision, if there hasn't been any input, it isn't always accepted though.
Now, I do want to say that I did have the opportunity to speak at the VSC academic retreat where there were at least a couple hundred people who were there. And I'm not talking about Castleton, I never brought that up. I talked about where we're trying to take the system and the interconnected, cohesive system. And I got a lot of positive response from it, as a matter of fact, you know. And so I think we need to take more opportunities like that. And I also, you know, I mean, we have two members of the press here, Joshua Gorman and Amy Nixon. There have been multiple stories now about the potential Castleton conversion, and I was wondering what might happen from that. And you know, I just will be honest, I've had nothing but positive response. So.
But this is about building a parade. It's not creating a structure. And you got to do lots to build a parade.
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know, just I would say again, make the rounds. You ought to be, you know, there ought to be opportunities for these stakeholder communities and campus communities to just ask and get answers. You know, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my institution? What does this mean for the system? You know, what's going to change? What's going to stay the same? You know, just give people an opportunity.
FAQs.
I want to thank Ames and Michael for sharing the afternoon with us, and I know because I participated in part of it, and thank them for the time they put in before they got here, preparing for this afternoon. It was extremely meaningful. I think everybody in this room is very appreciative of your contribution to the discussion and our future direction.
Thank you. I think you're involved in something really exciting, and that's why I say up the ante and really pull it off. And it will be discouraging if you just are fiddling around on this for another 100 years.
Sure will.
I want to second what Jerry said. You guys are great. Thank you.
Wherever Ames goes.
If I hear no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Anybody want to adjourn? So moved, second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Done. Thank you.
So where are you in New York?
Yeah, no, I
thought it was stationary. The right time.
Hannah's a unique name. I knew I had a family in City Years.
Thank you, David.
I don't know that I got into the sense.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I can let him know.
I think that's
I'll text him.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Pleasure to meet you.
I'm glad I've got a comrade. But it's my turn.
Are you headed back to Newport? When I was in Maine.
I don't have to row hard on my way home.
If you'll be going the opposite way of the traffic,
Jerry, real pleasure to meet you.
I meant to also put a little bit of work because you guys know, I mean, they're no amazing from the regional students. I have
Thank you.
And the reason why I
Johnson has to put him over the edge. There are actually 2 or 3 of us. And I know where we were at the moment it happened. Standing in this way, walk back to the room. There's some others who see it differently. Ham and I, yeah, that's the way it was. Okay.
No, that's why we're there. Never hesitate to pick up the phone and ask us how we can help. If for some reason we can't, we'll let you know, but in every instance. I know that one of us gives us help. That's why we're here. We appreciate your help. All around.
Thank you.
We'll spend some more time. All right? Oh, it's good to see you. Okay.
Thank you.
And that'll be good. And we've got a lot of that. Well, thank you.
Let's see.
Sue's just had her birthday.
She did.
So I think
I'll call you tomorrow.
have the same values.
But he needs to be reminded of that.
That's
I think he's all, certainly not.